vision strategy for Division X, or is it is it about setting new direction? Is it very formal? Is it very informal?
We have both formal and informal sort of versions of it. One is product strategy. So I head up product. So a lot of what we do is talk about product strategy. Mm-hmm. So in that, it's very formalized.
Yeah.
Scenario analysis. What does the market look like in a few years? And what's our position, competitors' positions?
But what you did today was a little bit more.
It was a bit more sort of purpose, employer branding. Like a bit more personal, perhaps.
Yeah.
Which we do sometimes. So it was not as formal. So that I really enjoyed that discussion.
Yeah. And could you sort of in your own mind, like where did your thinking go? Like you said it before, like something to be really proud of, something to be we want to do something impactful in the next 5 years. If you elaborate on that.
Yeah, maybe it sounds corny, but that's where me personally ended up is that what I'd be proud of is having that impact on making, something a little bit better in society. And it could be, if only all of our customers use this really smart algorithm, then society would be smarter and more efficient and perhaps a better place to be. It doesn't have to be grand, like we're saving the planet, but something very specific to be proud of. I mean, very externalized.
Do you agree with the some other people define, I think it was DeepMind or something, that the ability to make an impact on society can either be these kind of really grand, revolutionary innovations, or it can be really, really small innovations, but that just impacts a large number of people. So the collected impact will be the same for both of them.
I think that's a really interesting topic and reminds me of, I'm not sure if it is Bill Gates who should be credited with this quote, but it's at least that's where I remember it as most people overestimate what can be done in a year and greatly underestimate what can be done in 10 years. Mm. And I think that 10-year change happens through these smaller things that impact many and many smaller changes in a series, and you're accumulating sort of.
Ooh, now
impact. We're getting deep.
No, already. We're getting into favorite topics, compounding effects.
Yes, the compounding effect.
And let's talk about this in relation to organization and change later on. That would be interesting.
For your, future-looking 5-year scenario kind of analysis that you just did you come up with some major directions that you can share publicly? Some idea of what are really the potentially, things that we underestimate in 5 years, but that could have a big impact?
Well, for us being, quite product focused, and I mean, I expressed it in terms of the products now we're just about to launch, and this is public information. So we're doing, for example, a product called heating optimization. So I'm not sure if you noticed, but energy is kind of expensive these days.
I haven't actually noticed that because I have a fixed price on that.
Right,
so
well, one of the few.
The rest of us who weren't as clever as.
But you know what? He will have a shock. He will have a shock when his contract runs out.
The floor heating and everything turned up, and it's really nice.
You're maxing it.
Yes.
He's maxing it right now.
So we've done this solution, and it's very much based on data. In order to optimize heating, like if you have a thermal heating pump in your basement or something, it's using, 100-year-old thinking. It's using outdoor temperature and then the temperature of the return water if you have water radiators. And just by including real-time temperature of the actual temperature in your building, then you can introduce smartness. And you don't need to have very advanced algorithms for this. You certainly can, and it becomes better. But the key thing to make it happen is to actually get that temperature reading, get the data, and make sure that the data is good. So we've packaged this, and we've launched this product, and we think it's a great product, and it's going to save, somewhere between 10-15%, just this first version of it. And then that's really impactful. And then, we were talking in terms of like, well, what if, all bostadsrättsföreningar, condo associations here in Sweden and maybe in the other markets that Telia is active in have this. It would be good for us, of course, since we had a product success, but it would also mean significantly lower energy consumption, maybe already during next heating season. So then it was around that, and then it's taking it back. So what if we actually really succeeded with that? Well, that would make me really proud. I mean,
this is a perfect example, I think, of something that is a small innovation, but has a large number of users potentially. So the compounded or the accumulated effect would be really large, right?
Exactly. So that is, coincidentally, that's a good example. Mm-hmm. And then we talked about like how it is. I mean, the way that I think we're approaching it, it's not the tech. It's really, to be impactful, you have to have scale. So if you only do this for one building, that building owner is going to be super happy, but we haven't really reached impact. No. So then suddenly it's about process. It's about being able to roll this out to thousands of customers, handling the invoicing, the support, the stock for the devices that you need to get out, making sure the algorithm doesn't drift away and suddenly diminishing your benefits. So it's both the sort of analytical side, but it's equally hard the other parts. And that's what we need to be really, really good at. And we have lots of really great people in Division X who are also fantastic at building great scalable process.
Because now on the spinning on the word impactful, there is another angle or another buzzword like let's talk about adding crossing the chasm. We can talk about as startups into hyperscalers. I think we can talk about crossing the chasm of change within our large enterprises. We are doing data analytics. Are you really? Are you doing it in certain pockets? Do you have orphan analytics in certain parts? Or have you crossed the chasm to really reap the benefits of data and AI inside the full enterprise perspective? And then we can talk about crossing the chasm on a product.
Usually when I talk about crossing the chasm is about going from an early market to an early majority market and crossing that chasm. That's usually what we
and I think it's exactly that. But that fundamental idea, I think it is of course is coming from the product space, or you have a service or a product or a startup. But I have more and more started to think around those terms in relation to change, in relation to scale of using innovation. So, what is innovation if no one is using it? So I think impactful has something to do with, I really like that. I really like the small ones that goes huge in terms of scale rather than very sophisticated that no one uses. I think it's more impactful in my mind.
No, we talked about this also today in this session we had that I'm reflecting on is that sometimes you have these sort of momentous things that happen.
Yeah.
But most of the times you have these smaller things, and then you need to just be really good at doing them and then doing the next thing and compounding it. So I think that's very important also in driving organizational change. For us in Division X, we have, where we come across that the most is with our customers. So for example, we have one of our data products is a product called Crowd Insights, which is anonymized mobility data. So since we're a telco, we operate a mobile network, and there's lots of signaling going on, and we can anonymize that and aggregate that, and that tells us statistically what's happening in society, how people are, groups of people are moving around. And, of course, previously ethically secured. That's the only way to do it, the only way we can do it. So this product gives you all these insights on the real world. And a big part here is public transport. So, for example, by us we can statistically define the total travel demand anywhere in the Nordics at any given time. not real time. It's always at least 24 hours delayed for privacy and ethical concerns. But that data should be or is a gold mine if you're, let's say you're a region and you want to get the most bang for the buck to plan public transportation.
Awesome. But some people also speak about, for one, you can optimize the existing processes that the company has, and with the products, you can do a lot of incremental improvements on that.
Yes.
But there's also a fear about, missing out on the disruptive changes that can happen. And a lot of people speak about the Kodak moment. They focus so much on incremental improvement in resolution.
There was no Kodak moment. I mean, Kodak was well aware of what's going on. They just failed to.
Why did they fail, you think?
Organizational inertia.
So they're moving in the same way, just optimizing the wrong metrics, or?
Well, obviously they failed. I mean, that's the hindsight of it. But as far as I know, I'm quite interested in this. When we say the Kodak moment, I mean, at least what I've been reading is that it wasn't like a oh shit moment. That it was. They were very well aware of what's happening, but just weren't able to manage it, I guess.
Well, the way I understand it is like, from an R&D point of view, from if that is innovation, they were early on the ball in relation to digital cameras and all this, but hardcore they had a hard time refocusing their investments because they had their cash cows. They had their normal quarterly balance sheet to worry about, and basically they were not putting the investments according to the real future. They were kind of putting the investment towards the game they knew, because that was the easy way to sort of keep making the short buck.
That's what I think is.
So I think that's
what I mean by organizational inertia is, and that's why I think there's been tons of books written on how to innovate within large organizations, and you always have that challenge, of course, when you have your core business.
Yeah.
And your cash cows, and you need to make the quarterly result and so on. So that's always a.
But I think we're on the same page here, because I have the last year, so even this year, changed quite dramatically my view on what is really innovation, and I even talked about this in my keynote in Australia now for Data Innovation Summit. And I so business innovation, like user adoption, is the quanta of innovation. So if you have an idea, but no one is using it, it's just a crazy idea. What can you call an innovation? It's just with 2020 hindsight, that was an innovation because it improved something. And I think with
probably
that,
lots of those that we've never heard of. That was fantastic.
I mean, like and I did. Have you heard about Shindugu? There is like all these crazy Japanese inventions, ridiculous, stupid, just fun, but they have no usefulness, right? Is that an innovation? I don't know.
Maybe for some it was innovation. I don't know.
It's
depends
fun.
If it's could be
technical
innovation, business innovation.
Yes. What is innovation? And in my mind, then, like, this is coming back to this. To be innovative is also about mastering this with your inertia or the resistance to change and all that. So it's not about just having the brilliant R&D. It's about the compounding effect. It's about that scale. It's about making the moves to move on your innovation. Otherwise, you're not innovative. And then we can add on this thing with full-on disruptive innovation, which is even harder.
I think that's absolutely true, and that's kind of what I mean. We think a lot about that at Division X, because often for our products are often new things that our customers don't have yet. It's not like we go to a customer and say, "Hey, buy it from us instead," but it's typically something new. And then, like the Crowd Insights case that I started talking about, is so we have this data, this insight, and it's the combination of massive big data algorithms and lots of stuff, but it's coming out with insights that should be relevant if you plan public transportation. But there is an existing process how to do that, and that's the way it's been done for a long time. And there's decision processes around it. That's how the budget is allocated, and sometimes it's very hard to change that. And then even if you see a willingness from within that organization, in this case, it would be a customer of ours saying, yeah, like, this is really the future. They still have to make that change. And then it becomes very much about, like you're saying, it's about the organizational change and very little about AI, tech, data. And then that I just have, speaking of compounding, I have a compounding respect for this problem as we learn and do more and more and talk to more customers and get more product out. It's like, this is such a big thing.
Can you just elaborate a bit more? You said there was no Kodak moment. What did you mean with that?
Well, I think I can't say I'm an expert on exactly what happened in Kodak, but I think often the expression Kodak moment is that there is this almost like this binary thing that happened where you realized, oh, it's too late. You know, the world has passed you by, and you didn't act, and it sort of implies, I think, or this is the way I interpret it, that it sort of implied that the people leading Kodak didn't know what was going on.
But they did have an innovator, and one of the first innovators of the digital camera actually came from Kodak, like in 1985 or something, long before most other people. And they were still unable to recognize the innovation in that part.
But I think that's the thing, and I mean, you sounds like you know a lot more specifically about the Kodak history, which is really, I think, would be interesting to unpack a bit more your perspective on it. What I think is interesting is that, well, it wasn't like they were in a closed room and, you know, sealed off from the world. And they came out with digital cameras, and like you're saying, I mean, apparently this was this guy, and probably they done lots of good research relevant also with analog cameras that's relevant for digital cameras, but somehow they just failed to pivot. And they did, because otherwise they would be
failed with the organizational change, right?
Yes, and for me, the Kodak moment doesn't imply that you don't know. The Kodak moment implies fail to act, fails to change. So the Kodak moment is that, in a sense, as I understand it as well, knowledge-wise and even R&D-wise, Kodak was pegged up to get this done, but they failed to change. They failed to pivot, as you said. Yeah. And for me, when I see Blockbuster as another blockbuster moment, of course they saw what was going on, but they failed to pivot. They were too in love with their old business model. So once again, I mean, like it was very up in the open. You know, you could see how Netflix was eating in, but they didn't act. So the blockbuster moment is not about, we didn't see it.
Can I ask a question to you, Henrik, perhaps, and to you as well, Kristofer? But does innovation happen in the mainstream users or in the outlier users?
Well, then you first have to define what innovation is.
Whatever definition you have. So whatever thing that actually make a significant change in revenue, in the way you act, or simply something that change from how the product works today.
Well, my view is that it isn't really an innovation if it doesn't cross the chasm in terms of going from some sort of early market to an early majority. Probably start. I mean, when we bring new, I can just reflect on our own experience. I mean, I'm not an expert on the subject, but it often starts with the early adopters. I mean, you have people who are excited about new tech, new ideas, not necessarily because of the role they have, but because it's who they are. It's a passion of theirs. And then you very quickly see whether it scales or not. And then if it doesn't scale and you can't really cross the chasm, well, is it an innovation? I don't think so, because it's not. No one is benefiting from it to the scale that you want to. And then it's like the tree in the forest that falls and no one hears it.
I mean, what I'm trying to get at is a bit that you can do a lot of incremental improvement, of course, for mainstream users, but I think far too many companies are too afraid to focus on outliers. And if you just focus on mainstream, then you will continue to have the Kodak type of moments, if you call that a Kodak moment. And just to speak a bit about Spotify days when I were there as well, we had a problem where we had so many innovation coming from all the employees that we had. We had special hack weeks and it was thousands of them, and very, very few ever made it to production. And that was very frustrating. But I think still, like Daniel Ek said time and time again, if we don't have an atmosphere and culture where we allow failing fast type of ideas, we will never find the big innovations. So then you need to innovate, you need to focus on outliers, I would say. And then if you have a culture where it's allowed to do innovation that do fail, you will be able to find the 1 out of the 10, the 1 out of the hundreds that is the big change. But then you need to really have that type of culture. Do you see what I mean?
No, I think that's a very accurate description. And again, I can speak how we do in Division X in Telia. We certainly have that and try to encourage that culture to find the next thing. But then you need to be very quick about also killing your darlings. Yes, and I think where a lot of companies fail or in innovation units fail is that they just stick too long with something, their darling. So that's something we work a lot with is that it's fine to be looking at new things. That's how we find the next new thing. It's the 1 in 10 or maybe 1 in 100 perhaps would be even more accurate. But the really hard thing, and maybe it's a human thing, it's really hard to let go.
Yeah. But with this little bit of an intro discussion, I think it's time to introduce properly Kristofer Ågren as our guest today. So head of product at Division X, formerly head of Insights Division X and Tele2 via analytics and then consulting. So very, very glad to have you here today. And I think I will set up we discussed a little bit before the show today, do we have a theme? Do we have some pet topics? And Kristofer came up with, we really need to talk about data and how important data is in relation to anything we do, innovation and stuff like that. And then we need to talk about organizational change and then, product, monetization and go to market. And I thought, okay, can we make it some sort of umbrella case or umbrella?
We already did that, so
and
we're
then
done now.
This is value, right? And because even this starting point today, what we talked about, coming out of your management meeting where we the 5-year head topic, I think it's about being impactful. It can also be summed up, we want to create real usefulness, real value, and then impactful, crossing the chasm and all that. So I think we're going to have an awesome show today on the topic of value, products, organization, all the ingredients we need to get to value.
All the easy stuff.
All the easy stuff. And with that, Kristofer, why don't you just let the listeners know a little bit about who you are?
Sure. So I'm at Telia. I think you know who Telia is if you at least live in the Nordics. So it's the largest telecom operator here in the Nordics and the Baltics. So I'm part of the management team for a part of Telia called Division X. So I'm heading up our product unit there. And Division X is all about the new products, new growth products, growth businesses for Telia. And for us at the moment, it means IoT, so Internet of Things. That's our responsibility to grow that area and make customers, help our customers really get value out of IoT, which incidentally means usually getting value out of data. And then we also have some pure data products. But that's what I do now. I mean, I'm perhaps I describe myself as, I'm really a software guy, a coder at heart. I started coding when I was a kid, sold my first software program when I was 12, realized that I really like coding. I also like making money. Selling that was what did you code when you were 12? So it was a sales tool for people selling steel pipes. So back in the day, if you were to sell a steel pipe or piping, you would have to do lots of calculations to get to a quote. So it's like a quoting tool.
configure, how many pipes do you need?
Yeah,
how thick should
now you would maybe call it like a product configurator, like a sales tool. And essentially the coding was taking all these price lists and digitalizing them, and then so that when they met customers, they could type in, how many they need and the type of pipe and what is, is it going to be square or round?
And what was the situation where you as a 12-year-old came into this problem?
It was my dad, because he was working with it, and he was working at the steel pipe reseller, and then he got me into computers because I really wanted to. Actually, I wanted to have a like a Nintendo 8-bit.
What was your first computer, by the way?
It was a Amstrad 286.
Oh, I don't know that one.
No, actually.
286 as a PC, right?
Yeah, it was either that or it was the IBM PS2. I can't remember which one was first. But anyhow,
it was the Intel 286 at least.
Yeah, it was the x86 family, and then he said something like, "Well, maybe you should learn how to program a game instead, and then you can play it." Sounds like my dad is a real hard case, but I don't know. I think I got quite curious about that. So then he brought home a computer that they had at work, and then I started learning, and then he signed me up for like classes, C programming classes.
Was that your first programming language, C?
It was basic, and then it was C, and then it was assembly. And then, so I took these classes, and everyone else was adults, and I was like, I don't know, I was 10, 11 at the time, but no, I thought it was fun. And then I realized that, I didn't care so much about the gaming aspect. I just really like coding. And then I've always been a math and a science geek. So then, that has sort of turned out over the years to work a lot with data and analytics. So past that, studied computer science, electrical engineering, really liked startup environments. So been in a few of those. And it's always been on the intersection, tech, business, data. So when this job came up at Division X, where I actually started as head of data insights, it was a business unit to scale our data products. It was...
How did that come about? Because you were at Tele2 before then, right?
I was at Tele2. I was the global head there of data analytics. And I really liked telco because I'd studied electrical engineering and always found sort of that aspect really interesting. And telco is very much, it's communications technology. It's quite close. But I felt I wanted to make a change at the time, and then Telia came up, and I was running a data science team there for a while in Telia as head of analytics there, analytics services. And
before Division X was founded.
Before Division X was around at the time, and then I'd heard about it, and then this role came up with. They were looking for someone to scale up the data business. So it was tech, it was scaling up, it was, data, AI, business. It was just like,
I'm trying to remember
have this job.
Which year it was, because I was working at Vattenfall at the time.
Oh yeah.
And I know Brendan a little bit since old times. So I think he was in Carrier and got the job for Division X.
So Brendan is still my boss. So he's the head of Division X, and he was formerly the head of
because
Telia.
I remember they were sort of shaping it from scratch. And so when was that? I can't remember. Like 2005, 6, 70?
When Division X was formed?
Yes.
Oh, I should know this. It's got to be around 17, something like that.
Something like that, right?
And it started as a collection of several innovation things, and also Telia's venture arm.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's over the years it's become more and more focused. So now we're very much focused on scaling. So scaling up IoT and
to
data.
Position Telia Division X properly, what is it in relation to the whole of Telia, the growth business, the innovative business, real products, or what is the sort of more formal?
So it's essentially the IoT and data insights products and business of Telia, and then that domain IoT and data is kind of fast moving. So it's a market that grows quite quickly. So by then definition, we focus on the high growth areas.
And what do you define as high growth areas?
High growth areas. Well, it is it's data, isn't it?
Generative AI.
No, it's the digitalization. It's connecting, getting everything connected.
Yeah.
It's hard to get data if things aren't connected in the first place. So it's very much. I mean, we're very much a part of the digitalization vehicle of the Nordics, enabling connecting everything. And in our case, it's the things. So the sensors, could be cameras, could be temperature readings, could be where something is, could be if a door is open, if there's water leakage or not. So and it's getting that sort of data where it needs to be, so things can be smarter and more efficient for our customers.
And do you have any sort of clear verticals like energy, housing, buildings, heating, or what's your main verticals? Or
so we have both.
Discuss this?
So we have both horizontal products. So if we sell IoT connectivity, so for example, if you have, let's say, you come up with this great idea where you want to measure something, but you need to bury it in the ground. Well, then we have narrowband IoT for you, which is highly energy efficient, but it doesn't have very high bandwidth. But it has really great coverage. So we have lots of these sort of IoT technologies, and the use case doesn't matter. Yes, you can use that in any protocol. So that's the horizontal. We have an IoT platform. So usually when you connect something, you want to get the data out of it, and then you want to visualize it and maybe send it somewhere else. So then that's also horizontal. So we have the IoT platform. And also devices. We also resell a number of devices that we insure.
So different types of sensors, so different things, even sensors and edge intelligence, I would assume.
So we also have a edge computing device, and that provides that capability. It's an ARM type environment where you can run things at the edge. So it's like it's like an edge computing gateway. And then we have two verticals where we go a bit deeper, and that is smart public transportation. It's coming from an acquisition that we did a while back, a company called Feltcom out of Umeå, who had a very strong portfolio in terms of connecting public transportation, so buses and trains. So that is now actually one of our portfolios that my unit is responsible for. So that is making sure buses are connected. It's providing information screens. We're providing ticketing solutions. So if you've been in Skåne, for example, and using the Blippa, where you get a ticket by blipping, that's a Telia solution. It's a partner who delivers it, but it's all packaged through Telia. Even the alcohol logs as part of the portfolio. Eco driving, optimizing the heating of the bus. So we have a very rich portfolio when it comes to smart public transport. So we're quite deep in that vertical. And the other vertical that we spend more time on being a bit deeper and go direct on is the buildings area. So we call it smart buildings.
Smart buildings, right?
Yeah.
You were a little bit into smart meters and energy and all that, but that is not as clear vertical anymore, or.
Well, smart metering is certainly a very important area for us. So yeah, maybe we would call that a vertical, but it's a very specific use case. It's typically narrowband IoT. It's hooking up energy readers, water readers, gas readers. So that's a very sort of classic IoT case, and it's usually with narrowband IoT where you don't send a lot of data. But it needs to be energy efficient.
So here you came in and you started on the intelligence arm. Can you just elaborate a little bit on the journey inside Division X, or how it has evolved, you and your role, and also the company?
Well, I started with being tasked with then building up the data insights arm, which is essentially monetizing data and creating products that our customers want and can scale when it comes to data. So what existed already was an innovation project around what is now the Crowd Insights set of products. So essentially, as I mentioned, we can anonymize and aggregate signaling data that gives us insight on how people move in society. So when I came in, that was very much sort of in the innovation stage still. We would go to customers saying, hey, we have this data. Do you have a problem? Finding perhaps the outliers, as you termed it, to see sort of what's the willingness to use this, to pay for it, to integrate it, to actually, change, to be able to use this new data source. So then the journey we made was from that to actually now having a portfolio with hundreds of customers across the Nordics where it's being used to plan public transportation, to better plan public transportation, to help retailers, where they should be refocusing their efforts now post-pandemic, for example. We've also built a product on top of that where we estimate carbon emissions from personal travel. So if you know how many people travel, and we don't know exactly, it's statistics, so we don't know exactly how many took the train or not because it's all aggregated and anonymous, but we can statistically say something about it. So that means we can actually recalculate that and instead express it as carbon emissions. So that's a product called Travel Emission Insights that we market to municipalities and regions because by law next year they have to provide this type of data. They also do a lot of intervention to reduce emissions. So this allows them to do it in a data-driven way. So the journey that we were on and that I came in and started is to really go from innovation to scalable product. And then in the middle of that, the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
So we had this thing where just before the pandemic, we had been really good at finding the scalable use cases and, setting up processes so we can have many customers. And we were focused on two things. It was physical retail and public transportation. And what happened March 16th, 2020 in Sweden? No one was in public transportation and no one was in physical stores. So then we had to make this pivot essentially, and then we realized that the data is probably is useful, but not to say where people are, but where they aren't.
Exactly. So you flipped it.
So then we worked. That was a big pivot for us, and then we ended up working a lot with the Public Health Authority, Sweden, similar in the other markets, municipalities, regions.
This was the birth of the Crowd Insight.
And that was, Crowd Insights was a product before, and we were just in the midst of scaling it up, and then the pandemic happened. And since it was a product, we were able to actually help a lot during the pandemic, because if you have a data product where, it's about aggregated people mobility, you need to spend, we spent a year at least on ethical concerns, privacy, making sure that this is safe, have all the bases covered. You don't do that.
So actually,
during the pandemic. So the key was that we actually had it. Already.
All these sort of regulatory, all the headaches, all the blockers had been worked on for a long time. So you could basically then go to the health authority and say, "Hey, man, we actually have done a hard work here that we can use now."
I wouldn't call it blockers. I actually think those things are very important.
Okay, that's a better, yeah.
But certainly,
true. I follow you. I agree with
certainly you. Things that are not done easily, and to us, those were very important things to do because to be impactful, we had to do it, and we wanted to do it. So then, when the pandemic came, I remember this. We tried to get a meeting with the health authorities in Sweden, Folkhälsomyndigheten. And they were so inundated with people wanting to help. Everybody was contacting them and wanting to help. But somehow we were able to get a meeting, and it was like the shortest meeting I ever had. It was 15 minutes. It was like a line in my Outlook calendar. I don't think I've ever had like a scheduled meeting like that was that. If it even was 15, maybe it was probably even shorter than that. And they were like, right, okay, what's the deal? And then we very crisply tried to express how we thought we could help them, and then that resonated. And we actually spent crazy amount of time and real passion on that. And my team has mean, I don't think my team's ever worked that many hours, not because they had to, because they really wanted to. And it was like the most purposeful piece of work that me and many of my team probably ever, had done and perhaps ever will.
And what was the product? Can you just describe it a bit more?
So it's the crowd, it's a crowd insights product. So it's aggregated information on people mobility. So it's billions of data points, actually billions of data points, time series, each day that is anonymized and aggregated. That gives you statistical representative information.
So it's from mobile phones of people that you can collect from Telia, or?
Yeah, so it's whenever your mobile phone is on, essentially, it communicates with our cell towers, our base stations. So we count number of pings, essentially. So your phone will communicate on average around 400 times with the base station. And we know where our base stations are, obviously, because we built them and put the antennas there. So then that's the information we use. We don't try and it's not the location of the cell phone. It's not the location of the individual. It's the number of signals in a base station.
It's an aggregated count of number of people in a certain geographical.
Yes, and then we have ways to, in some ways, follow that across the network. So it becomes like, a mirror of the signaling in the network becomes an indication of how people move in society. And then we have a rigorous statistical process after that, where we worked with the Swedish Statistics Bureau on how do you go from that to having like a real representative statistic for the population of Sweden, Finland, Norway, Denmark, and Estonia.
And what was that used for? I can guess, but if you were to elaborate, so you have
during the pandemic, you mean?
Yes.
So it was used in in different ways by the different agencies. So in Sweden, for example, Folkhälsomyndigheten used it to see how people were adhering to the recommendations. And also to have a fact-driven discussion around it. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but during that time in Sweden, there were these posters, like ridiculous things, where someone had seen that there were a lot of people at Medborgarplatsen. And I mean, that was first page news. That's a subjective data. I mean, it's not even a data point. It's like an opinion.
It's very anecdotal kind of evidence.
It's very anecdotal. And then we were able to sort of help, I think, to bring a much more data-driven discourse in public. And I mean, Anders Tegnell even said this in one of the press conferences when one of the journalists confronted with him, it's like, oh, there's a lot of people at that restaurant or whatever. And then he said, well, it's important to have objective data, and that's why we're working with Telia.
Oh, really? Yeah.
And I thought, I mean, that was such a proud moment for all of us, because we had worked so hard to go from, I mean, that whole pipeline going from data signaling in the network that isn't there to provide population statistics on movement.
Can you just, for technical people like myself and people that may be listening that would like to hear, how do you build a crowd insight tech stack that can allow you to work with billions of data points in an efficient way? And I guess it should be more or less real time as well. Can you share anything, unless it's too secret, but it's something about, how do you build a tech stack, some kind of data platform where you can aggregate information on this scale?
No, that's a great question. And as you probably gathered, I'm quite a technical client person myself. So it's actually very complicated, and it's a lot of different stacks involved. So one part is where the signaling happens, and that is in our network, and that's just the telco stack. And then it's the uninterrupted anonymization and aggregation process that happens, and that is done on-prem, and because that data has to be on-prem for regulatory reasons and security reasons.
And I guess it comes from the cell network that you do have to begin with, and from that you collect it centrally on-premise.
So this data, we're not collecting data specifically for crowd insights. That's very important. So we anonymize and aggregate data that we have already in order to be able to run a mobile network. You need to process signaling. Yeah. And then this stack, this long pipeline, eventually then in an aggregated and the anonymized form, ends up in Google BigQuery, where we then do the derived insights from it, and that's where our analysts are working on transforming those types of insights into things that
BigQuery is not on premise, so you had some kind of way to move it, I guess, from on premise to Google Cloud.
Yeah, so most of the processing is done on premise, and then once it's aggregated and anonymized, it's more about the packaging, and then we do that in the BigQuery environment. So this is it starts as a massive data set, and then it gets smaller and smaller as you aggregate and so on. So that's,
you had some kind of. I know some of the tech stack you use, but I'm not sure if you want to share it, so feel free to not share it. But to do all of this anonymization and to aggregate that information before you send it to BigQuery, I guess you have some on-premise tech stack as well, right?
We have indeed, and it wouldn't be my place to talk about it actually.
Okay.
So
good.
But
let's not go there then.
I think you could probably guess. I mean, it's
I know people.
Modern big data stuff.
Yes. That's another t-shirt. Modern big data stuff.
Imagine that you have very large streaming data sets that need to be anonymized, aggregated, uninterrupted, highly secure. Yeah.
And awesome. Yes. So that moved into Crowd Insights. Has that evolved since the pandemic days? I guess you still have the Crowd Insights product, right?
Yeah, so it's very much alive and growing. So after the pandemic, we'd done this work with the health authorities, and there's many more uses during the pandemic. We worked on one really, really interesting research project we did was together with Sahlgrenska and Ericsson and Chalmers, where we took the Crowd Insights data and there was applied also other data sets. It was essentially to predict the number of admitted COVID patients. So Sahlgrenska Hospital actually used it to plan their capacity, like the number of beds that they should have in the next, I think it was 7 or 14 days period. So that was also, talking again about impactful. So that was a really, really, really interesting project. And that was very much around deep learning. It was using our data as the core, but then was, of course, also using data, number of reported cases and some other COVID-related data sources. And then that was actually published in, we co-wrote a paper on it, got published in Nature Scientific Reports. And also the cooperation we did with the Public Health Authority, we also actually wrote a paper on it because we didn't, we wanted to talk about it. And so that was published in the Cambridge Data and Policy paper.
If someone wants to search for it?
That's a really good question. I should know since I'm one of the authors. It was something like COVID-19 mobility data from the operator and agency perspective, something like that.
Let's see if I can.
But I think this was really smart that you made a huge effort to public scientifically, because I even remember, I think you were even in TV4 TV-soffan at some point.
I was also on the news, yes, which was a new experience for me, yes.
Because I can imagine there are two things. First of all, this is so important in the situation where this is at. But at the same time, we have this sort of, they can, Big Brother is watching us and they are stealing our data. They know exactly where I'm at. So to actually be very, very transparent on how important, and you made a huge effort on how to do this in a very, very correct way. So I think to the outside world, it must have looked like you rushed into it, but they didn't know the background story here, that you've been working on this for more than a year to sort this out, because it's complex to sort out the privacy topics. What can you really do and all that? So I think that's
really important to talk about.
Yeah.
And we also mentioned that in the paper. And I think also, we co-wrote it together with the Public Health Authority in Sweden.
Yeah.
And I think, if I remember correctly, they also have put in the paper that was actually one of the reasons why they felt that they could use this.
Yes, exactly.
Because it was already sorted.
Yeah, but and
it was already used by others, and it had already been vetted in a way. Otherwise, it would have been time would have been too short.
But this is actually a case study and a proof of something that if you go back to the DIG report and Patrick Ekemo, when they wrote the big report on what's the opportunity around data and AI, especially in the public sector. And they put the real effort on, in order for this to work in the public sector, it has to be trusted. It has to be, we need to have credibility and trust. If we don't build trust into our systems, it's not really going to cross the chasm. So that was such a huge part of that whole big report to highlight that. And I think this is actually now in real life, a real case study showing that I think that is part of why it worked and why we also, everybody was happy to, there was no real, was it a lot of pushback on it? Did you get, because people didn't know, right? So did you have pushback in the beginning or, from the public or press or whatever?
It was overwhelmingly positive, and I'm really grateful for Telia that actually dared to do this and actually go out publicly. We worked with the Public Health Authority, but we were also responding to media.
Yeah.
So, that was way above my pay grade. Someone decided that it's okay to talk about, actually go to media and be very open and transparent about it, which I thought was absolutely the right thing to do. But I'm really grateful that Telia dared to do that. And then I think it was like in my first interview with TV4 I did, that was the first question.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I remember that.
And I thought it was good because I wanted to talk about it and like why this is safe and data should be used. So let's show how you do it right.
Exactly.
So after that, it became much more about the story that the data told.
Exactly.
And the interviews were more about, okay, so what does this tell us about the travel behavior or so and so. And it became much more about, the story that the data was.
So in fact,
telling.
getting the tough question or the negative question out of the way and put that to bed was the absolutely right move on all parts.
Yeah, it was, I think. And I was well prepared for it. I wanted the question, and it came, and then we discussed it, and then I did many interviews, some on TV, but a lot on radio, on local newspapers, and so on. I try to always weave that in because I think it's important to talk about the source of the data, so I always try to bring that up. But it was never really became like a concern like that. And I think the solution, is really to talk about it, to be transparent. Because if you can't be transparent, well, what are you hiding? So that was really key for us, and that I think helped with the. Help with the how it was used also in the media. So after that, this data set, since it became quite well known during the pandemic, now it's like a standard statistic. It's almost like what you would get from the Statistics Bureau. It's sometimes referred to as that, even though it's coming from a private company.
Can we shift gear? I have a couple of questions. So do you want to put the question in between? Because I want to shift gear otherwise.
Yeah. I think for one, just to keep it slightly to Division X, can you just speak a bit about the organization of?
It's the same. Set it up.
Great mind think alike.
Okay, set it up and let's set it up together. Let's see if we can do that.
Yeah, but you are heading up the product part then of Division X, and perhaps you can just start a bit about how the organization looks like and how you can use the organization to be as efficient as you can.
This was his setup. Now I'm going to do the same setup, but with a twist. So back to the theme, everybody is wanting to get value out of data and AI. And the more I have worked with this, it's not about the tech. We have the change inertia, and we are having a lot of friction in how we are organized that doesn't allow us this to scale. We are not crossing why we're not crossing the chasm with data and AI. I argue has a lot to do with how we have organized work. So now, please, it would be extremely fun to hear about how you have organized this, because you are selling products. But I have like the bigger picture. Can we learn something of how you have done it in relation to, what works and what doesn't work. So please start with the normal question, but
sure.
There's a bigger question here.
I'm really curious to hear your thinking on it as well as I'm of the view that there's no perfect organization. It's always any organization is limiting information in some way, because that's how we humans tend to function well, at least in a large organization. So Division X is a functional organization. So I head up product. We have a commercial unit where we have the sales. We have a marketing unit. Name is kind of self-explanatory. And then we have an operations unit. So in these functional units, we specialize in those areas. I have huge respect for running operations when you have thousands and thousands, well, hundreds of thousands of customers. My unit is very much focused on being very efficient, good at product discovery, product engineering, how do we take it to market and all those things. And then sales, that is it's very much its own discipline, and then marketing likewise. And then we have a matrix organization. We have what we call X teams that go across. So these are cross-functional teams with clear mission statements, focuses. So, for example, the verticals we talked about. So we have a cross-functional team focused on buildings. So it's called the Buildings X team. And that's where we set the mission statements and the OKRs for that. And within that, we have the scaling stuff. And then we have multiple squads. And then we have a squad focused on new product.
So you use the terminology from Spotify as well with squads.
I try to not say Spotify because it's not the same. It's our flavor. It's our version of a cross-functional setup that tries to optimize both for specialization of your craft, but also small teams focused on very specific problems. And it could be the scaling of an existing product that may have reached product market fit, or it could be a small team working on what's the next big thing. And having that virtual allows us to be very flexible on changing that. As speaking of killing darlings and being able to move fast, that's very hard with a line organization. So then the functional organization or the virtual organization really helps with that, and it's easier to sort of iterate using that setup. So this is the setup of Division X, and then we also have guilds. I know that's also a term used in Spotify. Perhaps that one is the one that is the most alike, which is for us it's huddled around a competence area.
But just elaborate a bit more. What's the difference between the line and the virtual organization?
So the line organization is functional. So then you will have, for example, in my unit, I have an engineering team. I have a technical product management team, commercial product management team, product architecture, customized product delivery, and product strategy, new product. So it's like all these disciplines that are really, within those we have, people that are the best at that. And regardless if it's let's say buildings or public transport or crowd insights, how you do product management, how you think about the craft to reach product market fit is very similar. I don't want to have silos where we think about product discovery one way and crowd insights and another in buildings. So that's very important to have that in the line. And
so the line is basically then grouped on the competences that you
yes, have. Correct. And that also alleviates a bit the need for competence guilds, but sometimes we have, you might have a concept like security that everybody has to think about, and then that's a typical guild thing. And then the virtual organization is focused a bit, outside in. It's like buildings. It's like, what do we want to do in buildings? Well, we need to digitalize, make buildings smarter, save energy for our customers, and so on.
Is that the product focus then?
Product, or market focus. So it's around our products, around our customer problems that we're trying to solve, our value props, and then we set mission statements around that. And then if you are in if you're working with buildings, and you both have a line that really hones your skill in that competence area, but you're super passionate about buildings.
So basically the virtual teams, do you call it teams or squads or what?
We call them X teams.
And X teams
Yes.
are the virtual ones then?
Yes.
And they are using competences from the line organization to
Correct.
fill them.
Yes.
And then you have, for example, an X team around buildings, and they have the different, type of engineering skills and product marketing and whatnot.
Yes.
Filled up in that X team.
Correct. Yeah. And then, as probably you found at Spotify, it's hard when people belong to many different things. So then we try to keep it as closely as possible as a one-to-one mapping.
Mm.
Would it be fair to summarize it that on the one hand side, we have disciplines, functional areas where we want to have core capabilities, maybe even competences.
Yes.
And on the other side, we have like a product portfolio, market portfolio view. So we have our products which are organized in a portfolio around a core vertical, as an example.
Yes.
Or offering. It does, because you have
like buildings, for example.
Yeah, but you have an IoT offering, right? So you have a horizontal offering. That to me is also like a product.
Yes.
But
True.
So you have horizontal and verticals,
Yes.
but product thinking.
We have products. We have products, and we go to market in slightly different ways, depending if it's vertical or horizontal. It's still products, it's still a value proposition with a defined market segment.
But I was trying to distill out what is the organizing quanta here. So we have disciplines or competencies is one quanta, and then we have product portfolio is one quanta, and product portfolio as a quanta has a vertical view go to market or has a horizontal view go to market.
Correct, and that's all virtual teams.
Yeah. So basically now, for anyone who's trying to think about...
I really want a slide right now to show this visually because it's quite helpful. But I mean, think about it as it's a horizontal and a vertical aspect.
Yeah, because I think the core topic when we organize stuff is like, what is the ideology or what's the purpose and objective we are trying to achieve with our organization? Mm. So with this matrix, what are the things you're balancing or trying to achieve? I think you've said it. The one thing you have said is like, from a discipline point of view, I don't want every single team to reinvent the wheel on how we do product discovery.
Yes.
This is one objective. What else do you have as objectives? If you don't start thinking about the matrix here, why did you do it like that?
So it's as I think most matrix organization is you're trying to optimize for multiple things. So we need to make sure we're using capabilities, so we don't build silos around, our core disciplines, how to take product to market, for example. But also, how can we have really small teams, cross-functional teams that are really fast, solving very specific problems, and that's the virtual teams.
That's the virtual team.
So we're trying to optimize both for the speed and efficiency of really small teams. Having that cross-functional aspect, at the same time, not building a silo every time you do that.
Yeah,
because otherwise, the converse, the sort of inverse of that is to have a line organization that is then, product specific. And
I guess you have
not what we're optimizing for.
A normal boss or engineering manager is in the line organization then?
Correct. Yes.
And then for the virtual, do you have like product owners or something connected to them, or what's the?
So we have X teams, and that's the like a buildings X team, for example. There's an X team lead.
Okay.
That is typically the portfolio manager.
Yes.
That has a line capacity as a portfolio manager. Mm. We also have a virtual leadership team, actually, which I think is
that's interesting.
I haven't really seen that in a lot of other places.
What do you mean with that?
So it was a learning that I had from when running data insights as a business unit, is that I really leaned a lot on my leadership team. And in that leadership team, I mean, we talked about everything. It was about, maybe a customer wasn't happy. Maybe it was we had a problem with the data, or maybe we weren't really sure if we had the optimal product, discovery process, or it could be governance or regulatory, and we could talk about everything. And that's like a startup-y way of doing it. And that was really helpful for us as we were, fighting and trying to achieve product market fit. So then that's the kind of thing that I want to replicate in the virtuals, well, that's my view. There's others as well, but they're not here. But my view was, I think that I really wanted to capture that also in a virtual organization. So that's why we also have a virtual leadership team. It's kind of we ended up with that. It's kind of a cool concept, and I hadn't really seen that so much.
Because for me to follow, like, who are the members of the virtual leadership team and who are the members of the normal leadership team? Just to contrast.
So in my leadership team, I have the head of engineering, head of CPM, head of TPM, head of product strategy, and so on.
From the different disciplines, so to speak.
Yes,
functions.
The line functions.
Line functions.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then an X team, virtual leadership team would have, whatever that X team needs. So typically it would be an X team consists of multiple squads. So it would typically be like the squad leads. So you might have a squad for doing new product development. You might have an offering squad or an operations squad. So then it would be the ones who run those squads. So it's essentially like what you would see if it was a startup only doing buildings, and it had a leadership team. It would be these roles.
But the squad leads doesn't have like people management responsibilities then?
They may.
Okay.
It's not limited to it has to be a certain line role. It could be a line manager. It doesn't have to be.
But
so in the Division X mentality, this is something we are trying out, iterating, and try to improve. As I think many who are doing matrix organizations is the key is to continually improve on this.
Yeah, so that was actually my next or the question I had as the follow up on this. Like, so how long this blueprint you highlighted now, since when and how long have you had it in this way?
Almost exactly a year.
Almost exactly a year. And what were you coming from, and why did you change?
So we were coming from a more of a business unit setup. So I was running the data insights, and my colleague Björn was running IoT. And then we had sort of the competences within our unit. So I had an engineering team, and I had a sales team, and so on. And then Björn had similar. So we came from that setup, and then we went into this new cross-functional matrix organization.
And what was the driver for the change?
Well, it's what I mentioned already is we wanted to find a way to really optimize and become faster, and we saw also data and IoT is really coming much, much closer. So we have customers coming to us with, great, you've connected all our sensors, we can see the data, but we really want to understand why something's happening, or when my battery is going to die in that sensor, so I can go and replace it before it dies. And then it becomes much more of a data discussion than just hooking up sensors discussion. So it was also coming, having IoT and data, and the insights capabilities getting a bit closer. Other than that, you need to talk to my boss, Brandon, and then he can probably go a bit deeper as to why he wanted to make this change.
Actually, I think I will.
It was his call ultimately, of course.
Yeah, but and okay, it's all rosy and beautiful and great, but what are the...
I didn't say that.
What is the potential, what should you be careful of or think carefully about when you do matrix organizations? Where are the potential pitfalls or challenges to mitigate? And I'm saying this from no organization is perfect. It's a trade-off. It's always a trade-off. So what's the trade-offs? There are certain benefits we've heard with the matrix setup. Where do you see the sort of trade-offs, or where do we need to be careful now to balance and mitigate?
Well, where we're now spending a lot of time and how can we improve and clarify is very much on the interfaces between the line and these cross-functional virtual teams. How do you make it clear and don't create more confusion? Because that's, as we did this process, we listened to a lot of outside stimuli. Like from, for example, also people from Spotify. And others who have tried to do something like this. And some of the common things is it's just too many constructs. People are getting too many goals. Suddenly you have, 2 or 3 managers in quotation mark instead of one. And people, it doesn't work really well if you get torn in terms of belonging and multiple targets that are contradicting perhaps. So this is an area where we take a lot of care and also continually improve upon. So I think that's the biggest thing. It's how do you make this actually simpler for everybody working, and not the other way around. So it's all about simplifying, I think.
And then this is a never-ending story, of course. And then I'm working in Scania, so then I have exactly these topics, and then I add a global perspective, hub and spoke, or whatever you want to call it. Or
so this is hard in a large organization, and we do this within Division X, but of course we have many touch points to other parts of Telia, and then we have to interface with that. So,
but you had a chance for Division X that has the chance to sort of be its own, because I would imagine it doesn't look exactly like this setup in larger Telia or Telia Sweden.
No, so it's separate. I mean, it's not a separate legal entity or anything. We are Telia, and we're part of the Telia group, and we work with the countries. So, for example, Telia Sweden. I mean, whenever there's a customer in Sweden, they will have a contract with Telia Sweden. So Division X is not its own brand. So then we work very closely, of course, with our colleagues in Telia Sweden, the account management teams and product teams there to of course, make sure that we are aligned and work together towards the customers. Because if you're a customer, you're buying from Telia. Yep. And then you might be buying a lot of things from Telia, and you want to have that relationship to be smooth. And it shouldn't be the customer having to think, oh, now I need to call this other person because they're in another part of the organization. I mean, that's not simple for the customer. So for that, we certainly have a lot of touch points and want to work very tightly with the rest of Telia as well.
No, and the point was that like when I was in Scania and Vattenfall, like when you go in from Division X, which is one business area or whatever you want to call it, to the whole group, then you have an organization in each part of the different business areas, and they need to work for their objective and purpose and contribution. And then they might not look exactly the same, and then you have the overarching group organization, and this is how it plays together. So it's several layers here, I guess.
That's the nature of a large organization, and an organization with, a lot of muscle and a lot of good things also. So then, it's about figuring that out. But I think 90% of the time of most of my staff, for example, is spent on the things that they work within. I mean, specifically for Division X, and then some teams like the sales teams have much more interaction with their counterparts in the countries and account managers and so on. And then we also have a lot of interaction, of course, with Telia Group on like network. I mean, we don't run our own network in Division X. I mean, it's Telia's network, and we rely on. We want to rely as much as possible on what exists already. We absolutely don't want to invent things that exist already in Telia. I mean, that would be foolishness. So I kind of embrace it, because it's a lot there that we can, we're standing on the shoulder of giants in a way.
And as a way to close the topic or finalize the topic on organization here.
I wanted to ask a question to Anders on. Please. I mean, you have experience from Spotify. I mean, were you in Spotify where they introduced quote unquote Spotify models with tribes and squads and chapters?
That happened before I joined, actually, but of course we spoke about it all the time, especially in management circles, and we did experiment a lot. And one of the issues that we had, which I think you mentioned partly, is that with the initial, at least, matrix organization, you had what's called chapter leads that has the people management responsibilities, and then you had squads with product owners. The problem then was that the chapter leads had direct reports working in different squads without knowing really what they were building.
Yes.
And that was a really big problem. So then how can you fix that? How can you have the direct reports working in something that you actually have an expertise with? And I actually must say I like the organization that you set up. I think that's better than the initial type of Spotify organization. And what they ended up doing was that they instead moved from chapter leads to what they simply call engineering managers today, that have a clearer connection to the product or the part of the product or the component or whatever functionality they are building to. So the line manager do know and do understand the product, and therefore can understand much better what the direct report actually is doing. So to close the gap between the squads and the line managers, they introduced this and moved away actually from the original thoughts of the chapter leads.
Interesting.
But I think it's closer to what you're doing. To some degree, that move is I think I said it.
I actually recall this. This was actually, the guy who was talking about learnings from Spotify. I think he mentioned something like this.
Henrik Nyberg, or was it someone else?
I can't say.
But anyway, I think the idea of actually having a line organization based on competences, and then you have a manager there that actually do have expertise in that specific competence, is a really good idea.
Okay, great.
I think you're onto something good there.
I think we will, hope to fine tune this, of course, but we've been at it for a year, and I think it takes longer to make it really fully. I think get the full benefits from it. It takes time to change, but
I think just to close the topic a bit more, and just to see the pros and cons here about the different type of matrix organizations. What you do want to do, for one, is to have people that are having a nice, development of their competences, and they do that by working with people that have similar interests and competences. However, you also want to have teams that works for products and have a full product life cycle responsibility, and can take in an autonomous way decisions on when to do releases as independently as possible. So these two are actually speaking against each other and are conflicting.
Yes,
that's why
that's the fun part of it.
Yes, but by actually then having the mix as you do, by having the virtual teams that take the product responsibility, and then having a line organization that take the competences in that dimension, so to speak, then they still have a way to continue to build on their specific competences and have their kind of meetings to do so, while still maintaining the product focus. So I think it's a nice mix.
But
good. We're going to continue to evolve it,
but let's now zoom into value creation with data and AI based on how much organization plays out. And let me be a little bit cheeky or put my chin out and say, what you are describing now, I think is brilliant, and I think a lot of what is under the hood here that I want to lift up to the listener now. Because if you haven't experienced this, you don't really understand what you guys are talking about. You have a detailed understanding around product thinking. Your both organizations, Spotify and now Telia Division X, has a fundamental culture and mindset on we have product thinking at the core. Now, if I go to most of the companies that has a 100-year-old legacy that looks in a slightly different way, if they're in manufacturing, I can go back to Vattenfall, I can go to Scania. We don't use words like that. We use words like process. We use words like value chain. We talk about input, output from one function to another.
Well, that's important too.
It is extremely important, and we have spent millions on business process management ideas and organizational templates fitting for a process ideology. And I just want to highlight that what we are talking about here and the way you are talking about organization is in the camp of product thinking. Do you agree?
I think, we focused a lot on product here, and I'm of course heavily biased since I'm the head of product for Telia Division X. I would say though that, I'm the first to say that process is incredibly important. Both from a, say, product development perspective. It's important to know how to do that, and you could describe it as a process or a competence. It's how you know in which order to do things. But even more so when you scale. When you have hundreds of thousands of customers, also being able to talk about process and doing process improvements matters a lot. That's how you get to scale. I just wanted to say that that is also inherently very, very important. And also as a product manager of like, say, like a mass market product, a lot of what you think about is actually process.
No, so process is extremely important, and we need to have operating model, we need to have practices, we need to have DevOps practices, we need to have go-to-market practices, we need to have process, of course, to scale. But I'm talking now on an ideological, more deeply rooted, if you go back to your Michael Porter defined the value chain concept, primary activities and supporting activities.
Yes.
And from here, we come very clear to how we look at the functional areas as input, activity, output, and we understand the enterprise from a value chain perspective. So that has sort of grown an organizational ideology, how we drive up our business areas and functions that comes from this angle. If I flip it and I look at a software company, if I look at Google, if I look at, you can even look at Tesla now. He actually talks about, I've seen interviews with Elon Musk talking about the Gigafactory. Actually, he realized in order to scale for real, I needed to go to product thinking. I need to have concrete design product thinking, but on massive scale of the machine that builds the machine, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean that's like an engineering mindset, really, or a software mindset.
Yeah. So, but I think it's very, very interesting that hint. If we look at adopting data and AI at scale, if I'm looking at now, you're trying to sell a software product into an organization that doesn't really have a cross-functional setup, being able to take care of data, AI, as well as their. I mean, like you have a cross-functional setup in the product area in order to have the data, the data science. And what happens now when we go to the customer and they have a very different view on this?
No, and I think that's one of the key questions on how do we meet our customers and how do we do go to market so that we're relevant. And to be honest, it varies a lot because our customers will look in very different ways. Some are much more mature than others. Sometimes when we go with our data products or our analytics products, in the more mature organizations, I mean, you will have like a head of data or someone like that who will be very well versed in that space and will be the counterpart, or at least the business the business side with our customers will bring along the head of data, chief data scientists, and then you can have a much more relevant discussion. Many customers don't have that, and then we have to be receptive to that, and then our value proposition then has to then also accommodate for the fact that our user, the customer, the user who's going to use our product, that customer, is not a data savvy person, and then that means we have to design the product in a completely different way.
Yeah, but I mean, like the bottom line, like to wrap up the organizational topic, zooming out on adopting data and AI, and of course when this is your core product offering, you have a lot of thinking around this and have come a far way. And I put to you that a lot of times we are in a lot of analog companies with a proud analog history. We don't have the setup in order to basically have the domain competence of the problem at hand connected to the technology seven as needed, and in order to get usefulness or understanding how do we need to change our operations, how do we need to fundamentally change the operations to take on this product from Telia.
Perhaps we can just try to formulate the question out of what you're saying here. And I think one interesting question is simply, what is product development? And we actually started with this question a bit more. And to frame it a bit shortly, you can say that either you have more of a demand-driven type of product development. You listen to your users and you say, okay, this is where I'm going. Or you could have at the other extreme a more tech-driven type of product development, seeing, these are the tech experts, they are seeing the type of technology from AI or whatnot going this way. Yes. Let's build products around that. Or do you have any thoughts about that? Is either of those good, or how do you set up, what the next type of product should be?
I think it's a healthy sort of discourse between the two. That makes a lot of sense. We spend a lot of time listening to our customers. I think that's I mean, tech is important. It's an enabler, and it tells you what you're going to be able to talk to your customers about, what's going to be possible. But if you don't listen to your customers, you don't have a product. Or, well, you certainly are not likely to have a product market fit. So I think, you know, you have to be able to do both in a, you have to seamlessly sort of traverse between the two areas. And I can just give one example on which I think is very relevant to analytics products, because it's, even if you listen to a customer, it's going to be very hard to solve if you don't have the data. Or, you know, it's probably a better idea to start talking about something where you know the data exists and is easily accessible. So one example is, for example, is as I mentioned before, a very concrete use case. A lot of IoT devices are battery powered.
Battery power, yes.
And it turns out it's actually very hard to estimate how much battery life is left. It's not like on your phone where you have a graph, there's a Coulomb counter in the device that actually quite accurately calculates how much charge is left in the battery. You don't have that in these battery powered devices because, well, they consume energy, these kind of Coulomb counters. So then it's actually quite a hard problem to solve. And then turns out that in a narrowband or an IoT battery powered device, usually the thing that draw the most energy, draw the battery, is the radio. It's communicating with the mobile network.
Right.
Who has data on radio characteristics between the device, the terminal, and the mobile network? Well, we do as a telco. It's also our data because it's about the network performance. So then in that case, well, probably there's a product here where we can actually help our customers predict when they should be thinking about changing batteries instead of waiting for them to die.
So that's a tech-driven kind of development.
But it's both, right? Because it's both realizing what's possible with what we have, but if we don't have the customer in the loop early enough, you're not going to achieve product market fit, because it's very easy in this case to build a machine learning model. I mean, you have the data, you need to clean it, do the typical data quality, and then you can, you know, in this case, we used an XG boost. I mean, a boosted decision tree, simple, you know, super classic.
Very fast as well.
Very fast and very, you know, good performance. But then it's like, okay, do we predict if it's going to fail tomorrow? We can do that, but it's not very precise. It's much more precise to predict if it's going to fail in 30 days. But is that what the customer wants? Or do they want it even 3 months in advance? Or do they want it in a dashboard that they have to log in? Or should they just go an SMS text message to whoever's going to go replace the batteries? And when does that person work? So it's like suddenly you get very much into the value prop design of it. So you have to do both.
Yeah, yes, okay. Yeah, you basically answered my next question then. I guess it's bad to do the extremes, to do only tech-driven or to do only customer-driven would not be a good thing. So you need to do a hybrid of them, right? Or wrong?
Well, I think as with many things in life, it's good to have a balance.
Would you agree with the too much used Henry Ford quote of if customers just get what they want, they would simply have a faster horse? Do you think that's a valid kind of?
I think it's oversimplifying it greatly, but in some cases, especially when it's very new products, if you're in a very much an emerging market, you have to balance sort of individual customer insight with scenario analysis, what you see in the market, and not get too driven from input from someone who might not actually even understand the space. Mm-hmm. So maybe there's a little bit of truth to that quote, but I would listen to a customer and find value in that any given day. I mean, that is after all very, very important. When maybe you can get stuck if you're only listening to the customer and not looking at the tech side is when you end up building things that only that customer wants, and it turned out it was actually much more complex to build, and it would have been smarter perhaps to actually be a bit more leading in the discussion with the customer, having much more of a dialogue, just in listening, and also tell the customer what is going to be easy, what is going to be hard, what is going to be possible. And that's involving the customer rather than perhaps, only listen.
I think the key word here is actually involving. And I think that goes both ways, because I think there is a clear dilemma when we are talking to customers who doesn't know the art of possible, they cannot simply express the need in a way because they could not imagine how it could be done.
But you're talking to a customer who might be in a particular business process, and what you're thinking about is how they can do something different. It's often very challenging for that person to sort of think outside the box, as it were, because you're very much in your day-to-day and within that business process. So you have to also be good about, this is a skill in itself. I don't have it to facilitate these kind of customer interview workshops.
Because we are truly talking about two very different ways of things. One is to sharpening the saw or improving in the game we know. And the other game is to reinvent the game, to reinvent the process and basically say, okay, this is your analog process, how it has looked for 20 years. Do you want data AI sugar coating on it? Or actually we could reinvent this process. We could take away this process. This process doesn't need to be because the data is already there. So if we package it in this way. So for me, this one is improvement, one is innovation. If you go back to that lingo before. And here I think that's the challenge, right? So we can talk and we need to collaborate and work with the customer. And number one, we need to have extreme understanding for value in use and how this will actually be used and how the context is.
But just to challenge the thought a bit here, and I think we can all agree, for one, that involving the customer as soon as possible and having interaction with the customer and iterating the product as soon as possible is something.
It's not a bad idea.
It's not a bad idea. It's a platitude, to be frank. I think most people that have at least some seniority believes that that's a good thing.
Yes.
So then, what is the hard question, really? So I think potentially the hard question is who takes the initiative to come up with the ideas, who really do take the initiative to innovation. And if I were to quote someone from Amazon once who spoke about this, and they said basically that they really want to promote bottom-up type of innovation. Of course, you listen to customers, but actually innovation may come from them, but it's more about optimizing existing processes and the way they currently work. It's not perhaps the disruptive innovation that comes from the customer. To say that, still, of course, you should listen to the customers, but to truly have the more disruptive ones, you actually need to listen a bit more bottom up, and they have their process.
What do you mean with bottom up?
Yeah, so the people actually working in the teams that you have for building
like
the
what
product.
is possible.
Yes, and then allowing them to be truly innovative. And Amazon has their way of, I think it's basically saying that if anyone comes up with an idea, they should write like a press release.
Yeah, it's the working backwards method that they have in Amazon.
Yeah,
quite like that.
It is nice. So in a short way, just phrase it. This is actually the thing, if it's finished, what it would be. And then perhaps a bit details about how to actually potentially implement it. And they try to sell it, basically. And if some product manager agrees with it, then you start to build it.
Yes.
And then really enable that type of bottom-up kind of innovation from everyone.
I think that's a really good idea, and we do that. I can tell you how we do that. I quite like. The Amazon working backwards method is well known. I really like it. It's really for someone who hasn't. If you haven't used it, and then it's like, okay, so write a press release, and I was like, yes. What?
Exactly.
But then it forces you to think about a lot of really good things. So I think that's
and think about the customer as well. Very early on,
you're thinking about the customer
without
actually having talked to a customer.
Yes.
But the way we do it is we have our products that we scale up, and then that means that we're quite close to having product market fit, or we have product market fit, and we're on our way to cross the chasm. That to me is a very different discipline than coming up with the next thing. So coming up with the next thing, we have a disciplined way of doing that. As I mentioned, we actually have a new product team. Their job is to not come up with a whole lot, but that is where we have the discipline to evaluate the new things.
Is that like an R&D team, you would say, or how would you describe it?
I don't want to call it an R&D team. It's called product strategy and new product, because it's really new product. So whenever they do something, it's a product pilot. It's not a research project or a POC. It's a product pilot. So they will get input from, I can't talk about it more specifically, but we have one case there now. It's coming bottom up. Someone who's like, I think this is a great idea, and talks about it, and you're like, you know what, that actually sounds kind of great. Let's find out. And then you need to do the market research, and you need to eventually do product pilots and so on. But it could also be coming from our customers, and then it comes in typically through our sales. And they will say that, hey, you know, there's an awful lot of customers asking about this. Awful lot of customers have the same problem, and there just isn't any solutions out there. And then that's the other way how it comes in. And I don't have any OKRs or anything like that that tells people exactly what's the ratio between these two. But I can just conclude that at this moment, we actually have both variants. But they go into the same sort of funnel where they're tested, evaluated, and then if found to be likely to reach product market fit, they will end up in a portfolio or become a new portfolio, and then they go into the scale-up machine.
And I like the idea of actually building a product as soon as possible. I can certainly see, you know, we've spoken at length with Patrick Ekemo and others about the pivot and the problems that a lot of companies have that say that they want to use AI, and they build some kind of prototype for it, and it never scales from the prototype to a product. But then
it has maybe been more of a project than a product. Maybe, but still, for the new product team then, yes.
And I guess they have to, in some way, build something that's more than a prototype. Or what is really the difference then, you would say, from having a company that say that they want to get started with AI or some more analytical or data-driven use case, but they need to get started somehow?
Yes.
What should be the first step? Shouldn't they build a prototype, or what should they do?
No, I mean a product. I really want to use the term product pilot because that's also what I use internally.
Product pilot.
So I mean that is in a way a prototype. Of course, it's. But in order to do a product pilot, you first have to understand the problem you're solving deeply, and how you can solve it. You have to have some idea of what is the market size for this. Is this just something that one company is mature enough in the next 10 years to want? Well, we probably shouldn't do a product pilot on that then now. And you also, for us, you need to answer the question, why Telia? Because there are a lot of great ideas that are maybe not for us, where you can't really answer that succinctly to say, well, why would someone buy it from Telia? It's a great idea, but it isn't playing on our strengths. So you have to have some of these like check marks that you need to have check these things. And then if then we believe in that, well, then we do a product pilot. And it's a product pilot because it's typically a customer who's paying for it.
So you actually have a paying customer directly for the pilot, you mean? Or?
Typically we do, yes. And that's also it's also a pressure test of the willingness to pay. And it also means the customer has skin in the game. And then of course they will be well aware it's a product pilot and it might not have a continued life, but then, we contractually regulate that. And then they, of course, also then are able to then influence the development of that product much, much more. So that's how we do it. And then the challenge is to keep it small still, so it doesn't explode and you get too big of a scope. But that's how we look at it. So I think that method probably isn't suitable for like the truly out there mutating innovations. And that's not what we do in Division X.
But I find this very fascinating because on the surface now it's just semantics, POCs, prototype, pilot.
Yeah, but it's important when we call things.
But and I think sometimes on LinkedIn or when we read stuff, it's just buzzwords on the top. But if you flip it, the label comes last. First, we need to fill it with the content. What do we mean inside our context? What matters for Telia Division X? How do we think about this? And that becomes the real job to fill it. Like, in order for this to be qualified, it needs to have these different dimensions that you highlighted, and now we call it a product pilot. And I think there's a lot of learning to this because it's easy to throw around these words, and we all do it. But the companies that has come further, they have built their internal lingo where there's the meaning it really means something. And that's why now you really want to be sharp. This is a product pilot. I can stand for that because I have filled it with something. And I think that's a learning in this, that in one way we can have a philosophy, and we have highlighted this. We go from pilot to prototype, all these stages. It's fine. Whatever you do, find your own meaning in depth and fill it. And that matters or is relevant.
And I think that's important, and talk about it. I think that's it doesn't have so much to do with Telia or Division X. It's just personal experiences. You can never repeat something too many times. And talking about what you do and why you do it and what you call it.
Yes.
Just repeat it.
Yeah. There is one angle on this. Sorry, to wrap it up. You wanted to wrap it up now.
Yes.
I really wanted to ask I'm trying to make a point here, and I'm failed before.
How's it going?
When we go to our customers, and we realize all this stuff, how we need to innovate and all that. For me, I see a lot of customers, they don't have these mechanisms to take on board innovation, as an example. They are sort of improving in the game they know. They have projects and they have their process. But to work with this thinking, I think you need to work the same. We have a pilot now. We have of how we can improve or reinvent our process. So, so when we go to the customers, so what's the experience of the maturity of taking on innovation? What's your view here?
I think and I just want to say, it's not that we're the only ones in Telia working with innovation. Not at all. I mean, there's many other units in Telia working with innovation. Some are, even further out, and some are very, customer specific and so on. So just want to make that clear. But other than that, I think that to me, the term product pilot means that you're sort of, when we have a product pilot together with a customer, we have contracts, and then it's very clear. But then you think about the outcome. Like when the pilot is over, because it's going to be over because it's a pilot, what's the metrics that you needed to hit in order to actually believe in this, test your hypothesis. Too many POCs just become, just swamp, and you just have too many of them. I think the pilot to me means it's a bit more rigor to it. You have to think about, like, when is it done? What do you need as a success criteria? And then you need to be ruthless. If it's not delivering as you thought, then you need to stop that initiative, and then you need to go to the next one. I think we talked about that earlier. That it's the fail fast. It's so easy to say. It's a platitude. I challenge anyone to tell me, like, when did you really fail fast? When did you really stop something that really, didn't feel good, but it was the right thing?
And my key question is, let's take the temperature on Sweden. How good are businesses in Sweden at working on pilots, innovating, bringing innovation in, adopting, reinventing their processes? Are we good at this in general, or are we stale? Is it challenging? I'm trying to get to the,
bit of a politically sensitive question.
No, yes, and we are not pointing fingers to any specific customers, and we are talking about what's the climate in general. Are we good at adopting innovation? And you said it before, and it really resonates with me. I'm getting more and more humbled around the organizational change or the change. Yes. And I think this is at the core when we want to innovate with data and AI. And now we're having Telia Division X who has these products. But are we good at this? I don't think we are. I think you have a lot of stuff, how we work with efficiency, that sort of works against us. And I'm not pointing any fingers. I'm just trying to put the finger on the temperature here.
I think it's too broad of a question for me to answer. I mean, what I could zoom into is perhaps a bit like how data is being viewed in different markets here in the Nordics, and that really differs. I think the public sector is way too slow in Sweden. I mean, we see open data initiatives. We have 290 municipalities doing their own thing on how to make data available. What about data quality? How are those things even comparable between municipalities? Norway is investing a lot more in this. In Finland, more on open, it's more nationally mandated when it comes to open data. And I think that especially in Sweden, the discussion about open data and data quality is sorely lacking, because open data without data quality assurances has very little value. So I think there could be much more driven centralized in Sweden, and I think that would be enabling a lot of innovation from many companies if we could just raise the bar there, and also for the government, I think the public sector, to also embrace that there needs to be business models around this. It can't just all be free, then it's never going to scale. So it's here I see, for example, Norway being more business friendly when it comes to enabling data business models.
I'm tempted to continue that discussion, but the time is flying away, and we have a lot of more philosophical, harder to ask questions, but more fun questions.
Does it typically get more philosophical as you get further into the night?
Yes.
Okay, excellent.
It does, especially after one beer or two. So,
well, you're the guys drinking beer, so
yes,
maybe I should have had some myself.
Anyway, still not going too philosophical, but I thought, since Telia is, as far as I know, very concerned with keeping the privacy of their users, perhaps we can ask with a very fluffy but hard to answer question about how can you actually build data products at Telia while still maintaining the privacy of the users?
Well, for one, I mean, the easiest way is to have data products that is not based on personal data. And that's often the case with our IoT products, for example. It will be data that's coming from a sensor and so on. It's still, it's our customers' data. So then it's not like we build products on customers' data and then sell it to someone else. Then, we will then use our customers' data for that customer.
I think that's a comment that is not really, well known. Simply that if you use sensory data in that way, it doesn't necessarily have personal data in it, but it still can be built. You can still build a product around it, right?
Totally. So I think that's often the case in an enterprise context when you work with at least sensor data. In some cases, it actually can be treated as personal data. Let's say, theoretical case that you have something showing you, the position of a car. Well, that's personal data, because if you also know who's in the car, for example, you might actually conclude that that's actual personal data. So you still have to take care and be sure that what you're building, what you're using is cannot be classified as personal data. And in our case, a lot of times when it's working with sensor data, it just simply isn't personal data. So then that makes everything a lot easier. It's still, its security is still super important, of course. Could still be very valuable data to our customers. So that becomes an important part. And then also being very transparent with the customer, how their data is processed and so on. But ultimately their data, their insights. Otherwise, in Division X, we generally don't work with personal data. So then we work with anonymized data. So like the Crowd Insights products, for example, is fully reliant on the data set being fully anonymized and also aggregated.
But when you say fully anonymized, it's sometimes you have the pseudo-anonymized data.
Pseudonymization, yes.
Yes.
That is not the same thing.
No. But you mean properly anonymized data in your case?
Absolutely. Otherwise, it would not be GDPR compliant. So it's truly anonymized. And that means you have to take away certain functionality. So the product, you could get deeper insights if you didn't anonymize. But
how
in
do
our
you
case,
anonymize?
we actually make concessions on our product so that they are truly anonymized, and you can never go back, because then it would be pseudonymous. And then pseudonymous, according to GDPR, is not the same thing as anonymous. And then you have to have consent, or you have to have legitimate interest to process that data.
But then, there are a number of ways, I guess, to make the data truly anonymous. And are you using techniques like k-anonymity, or can you just elaborate a bit more, because you have so much information about people using their phones that's deeply connected to a specific person and contains potentially very sensitive information. How do you make it anonymous?
So it's a combination of things, as it often is. For one, when we, as I mentioned, we use location of our cell towers. So by default, it's not particularly very detailed spatially. And then also we do use k-anonymity and we use aggregation.
Perhaps we should explain what k-anonymity is.
So k-anonymity means that you need to have a number of data points that behave the same to be able to even see them. Otherwise, they get filtered.
So at least having 5 people in the group.
Yeah. So like X number of people having the same behavior. So if it's less than that, you can't see it, and that's a safeguard, and that's why we crowd insights. It's about movement of groups. I mean, it's highly aggregated. So it's a number of. I mean, it's k-anonymity. It is.
Is differential privacy a thing that you could use, or?
We have introduced it in a few. I was going to say POCs, but
you're not allowed to use that word here.
As we were testing a few ideas in the past, using we actually looked at using GANs, generative adversarial neural networks, to generate synthetic data as a way to also work with anonymous data and still train a GAN on something that might be personal data, and then you would capture the statistical attributes of it, and then you would generate synthetic data. And for that, we wanted to measure the epsilon, I mean, in the differential privacy, to get a measure of like how private it is. But for crowd insights, it's just irreversibly anonymized. We don't differential privacy is not even there. So we take many steps to make sure that it is anonymized and aggregated. So, I mean, an example of aggregated data would be like, well, there's 20,000 people who went from Stockholm to Uppsala on Saturday.
And that's anonymized for sure.
Yes.
But when it's not, how do you find GDPR, for example? I mean, are you trying to stay away from using personal data, or when you have to, do you still build products on top of that? And what's your thinking about actually using personal data when necessary?
Well, then GDPR is a great guideline on how to use that. So I mean, I've heard many talk about that GDPR is so complicated and why do we have it? Everything would be easy. But I think it's the other way around. I'm really happy that we have GDPR. And whenever you want to do something with personal data, it's very clear what you're supposed to, what you can do and what you cannot do. Then even on top of GDPR, I would say you should also make your own ethical judgments on whether it's ethically okay. Even it might be legally okay, but is it ethical to actually do something? And no, we just very rarely come. I mean, in Division X, as we're focusing very much on the B2B space. A lot of IoT type data. We don't get in contact too much with personal data. It's not like a strategy of ours that we don't want to touch it. But if we came across it, then GDPR is an enabler.
But I think to see GDPR as an enabler, it also says something about in different companies who has different maturity in relation to working with data and trying to build data products. We have said this before, GDPR is not a problem for the tech giants, because they have all the both the lawyers and the technology in order to do what is right.
Nor for Telia, potentially.
And then nor for Telia either. So if you're savvy enough, GDPR doesn't become a problem in this sense. So the GDPR becomes scary maybe in the public sector where you don't really have the know-how, and this is something very fluffy and something very scary, and you don't really know how to navigate the space. So what you are highlighting we use this as a perfect map, and we know it so well, so we can navigate with it. So then it becomes actually very useful. And I think the challenge now is for all the companies that has a little bit less maturity around the data space, dipping their feet into this. And
I think you should embrace it. And then also I would say, I would make a pitch for anonymized data.
Yeah. Just go there. I
mean, just start with anonymized data. Find a way how to make sure that it is anonymized, obviously, so it's not pseudonymized. But I mean, there's, you could probably ask ChatGPT on how to make sure it's anonymous.
I think this is great advice, because we have all
then
this.
You work with that, and it's the ethical. It's the ethical. It's both the ethical thing to do. It's a legal thing to do, but it is also making your life simpler, because then you, as a data scientist, don't have to be afraid or worried that you're doing something that might not be.
But I think this is a great advice, because I think you can go into.
You're asking ChatGPT.
How do I? No, but to be serious here, Kristofer, I think we get into a lot of pseudo problem discussions, because you have a use case and someone says, "Oh, we can't use this data; it's private," and then we are getting all hanged up on this.
Yes.
And then you go one step deeper. How much are we killing this use case by anonymous data, or how can we think about the use case with anonymous data and go this route from the start and make that a no regrets decision? I think it's a great advice that really, you know what, you could probably have a lot of value in a municipality doing what you need to do without having the knowing exactly who it is. I mean, it won't work for all services, of course, but there are more
in some
use
cases you simply have to process personal data, and then of course GDPR once again, tells you exactly how to legally do that. Either you have a legitimate interest to do that, or you get specific consent. It's quite simple, and I would just say stop complaining about it, and
a little bit refreshing, Kristofer. I think it's refreshing argument in the debate.
Just do it. Yeah, well,
just do it.
Tell that to all the startups.
Get the T-shirt. Just do it.
Yeah, well, just do it right then.
Just do. Okay, that's the T-shirt. Just do it right.
But it is a lot of work, and I can tell you.
Of course, it's a lot of work, and it's costly, and
it's very costly. Yes, and you need to have expertise and competences that normal companies may not have. So even at Spotify scale, it was really, really tough.
Yeah.
So to do that at non-data ready companies is very hard. We have to appreciate difficulties as well, I think.
I appreciate that, absolutely. I think now the time has gone by. I think it's that knowledge is more accessible than it was before. So it's easier to get that kind of advice. But then also it's a case for you shouldn't do these things with companies that don't have that capability.
That will really hinder a lot of innovation, I would say, if you're not allowing startups.
Why don't they just do the innovation right then and take that in from the beginning?
They don't have the resources to do so, potentially.
Well, how are they ever going to be scaling then if they break the law?
Well, perhaps the law needs to be adapting to allow innovation as well then.
That's one way.
And potentially, we could go the AI Act kind of discussion here, but I don't think we should.
Actually, I'm much more.
That's a whole other topic, and yeah.
But there is
interesting one.
I know there is a pet topic of you, Kristofer, and I think we can do it on a more. I think it is a potentially quite deep topic. Because we're coming back through GDPR now into the importance of having the right data, having quality data, and you expressed this as even a passion. Like, this is so important that we get this topic right. What did what is your angle into this discussion that you want to really put forward?
Well, I think how I came to really be passionate about it is through having worked as a data scientist myself. And I think I speak on behalf of many data scientists that data quality, data prep, it's a big thing. And it's often a blocker. It's often something, if you discover it too late, it could be quite detrimental. Even if, you might have a product out there and you realize that, we have data quality problems. And there's so much focus now on new clever algorithms. The transformer architecture is amazing when we look at sequence data, ChatGPT, and it's suddenly becoming more about the algorithm. But to me, it's like there's so many high value use cases. For example, and I'm biased, so I talk about the IoT type of data, where it's still very much about the data and having that quality of data, and just like the simple things like. You appreciate if you worked as a data scientist. Let's say you just have a temperature feed in a building and you want to steer the heat, the central heating. Well, what are you going to do if you have missing data points? And what if you're working as a data scientist? You might want to use aggregates. You want to have the average temperature of an hour. Well, what if and normally you get a temperature reading every minute. What if you only had one reading? It's not really an average of that hour, is it? And these things then mean if you don't have a handle on these things, how you do imputation or how you say that this data point is actually bad, we should throw it away. well, then the algorithm, you have a NA value, or you have something that you can't feed into your algorithm. How do you handle that? And I think there's just so much there, and you can spend so much time on that if you don't have that sorted already at the data source. So if you don't already have that data telling you that here's hourly averages, oh, and by the way, this data point is actually not representative of an hourly average. I mean, it's a very simplified, silly example, but
I think it's an important one. And if I try to just frame this as a question, what you just said, and of course, the very high hype right now is the ChatGPT type of, and large language models that everyone, especially in media, perhaps not as much in research, but also in research, they're speaking so much about this. And I think what you're saying is also rather interesting, that, some people, as I think especially non-technical people, think that the only type of AI today is generative AI and these kind of large language models, and that's really wrong. And at least to me, and please correct me and tell me what you think about this, I think rather there are at least a number of different types of AI you can think of. One is simply the rule-based kind of approach. That's still valid for some use cases. You have traditional machine learning, you're working with structured data, and that is really valid. And the type of techniques used for that is still the one you should use for a lot of use cases. Then you have more deep learning based on unstructured data, and they are useful for their use cases, not for structured data, but for their use cases. And then you potentially have the large language models and generative AI of today, which is not really replacing any of these other ones. You still have the rule base, you still have the traditional machine learning structured data type of approaches, you still have the traditional deep learning. Traditional deep learning. That's
yes.
Are we at that point now?
We're at this point. Traditional deep learning,
yes.
not traditional machine learning. Traditional deep learning.
But they also have their use cases, and it's not replaced by generative AI. So I in my view, at least, and please let me know what you think about this. The type of large language model and generative AI we're seeing in just recent 1 or 2 years is really adding a new use case simply for what you can use AI for, not really replacing the other types of AI. Would you agree?
Largely, yes, I agree. I think also, if you look at generative AI, like the transformer architecture, for example, I think it's really also useful for many other things other than LLMs. It's a very interesting way of also working with time series data, and any type of sequence data. You could use it to get much better embeddings, for example, for sequential data. It could be temperature readings. Using my silly example. So I think it's in a way it's another tool in the data scientist toolbox, and I fully agree with you that you need to tailor towards the use case. So depending on the use case, you select what is the most relevant at hand. And maybe, even rule-based, knowledge, reasoning, first order logic, all that stuff, I think still has a place. That doesn't go away. So I think long way of saying yes, I agree with you.
But and how does this then tie back to all the stuff that goes into data rather than models? Because one way of looking at this is then, irregardless of all these different beautiful types of models we can use, irregardless of any of those use cases, you need to have a handle on your data in relation to the use cases and in relation to what you're trying to do. And it's so much that can go wrong. Also
you need to have a handle on data so that when you train your models, you know what you're doing, and the output, even though it might not be super explainable if you're using a deep learning algorithm, it's still somewhat, you can explain it in terms of the data still. So I think it's you need to have a handle on it so that your model behaves well, and what happens to data over time. Maybe your data quality shifts over time. Well, then your model that you trained a while ago is going to behave differently. And
what is your point here is a little bit like we need to spend equal amount of interest and effort on the data part as the model part, at least, or is that where you're going with this?
Even more, I think. We've talked. I think maybe it's not the rage these days, but talking about data as a first-class citizen, I think we never got there. And now we're sort of fast forward past that, and I think we still need to really position data as a first class citizen and really really work on that and really make sure that that data has explainable quality. We know what it is and metadata around it, lineage and all that stuff. Because how else could you then scale this? So once again, let's take crowd insights as an example. There's data going back to 2019. A lot of use cases are around measuring if things have changed today versus last year. There's crazy amounts of things that have happened in our network in a year's time. How do you make sure that is represented? You do that by knowing deeply where your data comes from and what it looks like, and expressing data quality also. And I think that's the key to scaling a lot of these things. Then I see, with all these advanced models, I just see a lot of overfitting happening. And fitting on noise rather than the signal. So I think
isn't it also a little bit like then what you in between the lines you're screaming out to us right now? Don't just run on the hype train, but go and get basics right. And even to the point where you can be an absolute newbie, working in a data warehouse with BI stuff, normal old school stuff, but don't screw around with the data part. Even whatever you're learning, the quality you're putting into the data here, you will have that as an upside when you want to go into more fancy stuff. So it's like a no regrets for your future. This is what I'm hearing between the lines here that we.
No, and I think that's where sort of BI has to drop on data science. Perhaps is that in BI you understand how important data quality is and your data is, and to deeply know it. And I think that's. I think we can really hang on to that even more and lean into that also from the AI from the data science side.
So in order to have structured reports and all that, then we had to sort it all out. We needed to clean it up in order to get to a report.
You needed to know where it came from and how the data point is generated, and you needed to know if suddenly it looks weird, then you drop it somewhere and you don't add it to the final result because then that number is off. And I think we need to, we still need that. We still need that, but it's a different flavor when you do it for data science, of course. It's different, but the essential fundamentals, that you need to do it's still there. That's the argument here. And then a bit ironic and interesting is that, there's plenty of use cases floating around the internet on using ChatGPT to help you with fixing your data quality. So I think, it's a bit of irony there.
That is ironic.
And then we have, it's cool. A lot of cool companies around this. We have Validio here in Sweden, for example, also using AI to fix data quality. So I think, it's just something that I'm really passionate about, that I see a lot of things, failing at a later stage because you just didn't really have a handle on the data. And then, that to me then, it's a tangent towards what we talked about, like open data. For open data to be really useful, valuable, you also you need to sort the data quality, and it's not just here download a CSV. Where can I download the data quality metrics? And what do you think? Where are we at when it comes to data governance and data quality and all that? For me, generally, you mean? Yeah, I think the whole industry. What do you think? You're the ones interviewing lots of more interesting people than me. For me, what are you hearing? Bottom line, I think the field to some degree has, now I'm taking the enterprise view. What do I hear and see in general in corporations? There's been a sort of a data governance function that has been quite manual and quite process oriented and trying to do it right. But I haven't seen how that can truly scale either, the way we're doing it, people. So what I think it's where it's at right now is when we start talking about computational data governance and enforcing data governance in code, and we are talking about shift left. So basically get it right in the design. Don't make data governance and data management an afterthought. And I think that's the big difference where I see the people are having a handle of data, they do data governance by design and then enforce it in code, and they build it into how they set up the data pipelines and data products that you can't really. No, and that's the way to do it if you're building it from scratch. So I certainly hope that's how startups are doing it, and because they certainly have the ability to do it. In larger corporations, working with AI analytics, when you're training the models yourself, at least, you're always downstream. That's the challenging part. You're downstream. The data gets created or was created somewhere else for a different purpose. It wasn't created for the purpose of your model. And that's just very challenging. And I think that's why data governance is such a challenging topic in large organizations.
Yes, but isn't it that we should have another class of requirements? We have talked about functional requirements. We have talked about technical requirements, performance requirements in all years. When will these sort of ERP programs start talking about data requirements? Or, I mean, like we need to start by design getting up. We're doing these, application, the source data systems.
Well, maybe you should have data analysts, data engineers, data governance specialists
also here as part of these projects.
As part of the procurement process when you're bringing in new business ERP systems.
Now we're talking, right? Because at some point we have a legacy. Okay, I don't, how many systems you have in Telia, I don't want to think about. But I mean, like you have so many SLAs. So we have this technical depth. Okay. And to fix all that is impossible. But when do we stop putting more, digging the hole, so to speak? I think we're still digging the hole in some of these bigger projects even.
I think it's not just data. I think it's all sort of non-functional requirements that come in that make large organizations, wanting to shift out legacy. I just hope that data really is in that process is treated as a first-class citizen. It's not only about the fact it has to be able to run on the cloud or on-prem because it is regulated to do so, or performant or secure, and that data has a place there as well.
Could we try to move to some really philosophical topics?
Let's go there now.
Let's go deep.
You focus a lot on public transportation as well.
That's yes, that's true. We have a smart public transportation offering, and also Crowd Insights. That type of data is used in the public transportation sector.
What do you think about the future of driving in public sector or public transportation or in general? And I'm thinking, of course, Tesla, full self-driving kind of things. Do you think that's coming soon, or is it really far away?
I think at scale, it's really far away. It's here already, but I think at scale, it's really far away. I think it's just going to take a long time before market adoption happens at a wider scale, like robo-taxis, which I know Elon Musk has talked about. I've read a few reports on fair amount of research on it, and it's it's projected to have market adoption. What was it like? 2050 or something like that. That's when you reach critical mass, where it's economically also viable to do it.
You do know there are a number of robo-taxi companies already, like Google and Waymo and Cruiser and whatnot.
And I kind of personally hope that it goes much faster. But if you ask me, that's what I hope for. What I think is that it's going to take much longer.
Why?
Well, because of the economics of it and the market adoption, and looking at how long people have cars, and regulatory headwind. There's many market factors that sit in the face of this, and also the economics of running a. Wish I had that report in front of me. I was reading a really interesting report on it, on like the business case for the economics of the robotaxi case. It's just like, it's not economical. It doesn't, you don't get to economic scale on it until you have a much larger adoption, and it's going to take much longer for that to happen.
Because of users don't want to use it, or why do you think it's hard to scale a robotaxi service?
Well, this is fortunately I don't remember verbatim what was in this report, but I guess my personal view is that it just takes time to adopt to that, and I also see
for customers, you mean, or for the technology, or for legal purposes, or for business purposes? Or
first of all, the technology I think isn't there. Just look at Spring in Stockholm. You can barely drive there as a human. There's so many edge
But perhaps
cases.
AI can do it better than most humans.
That's the thing, but that doesn't mean people will adopt it just because statistically it's better. So I think there's just so much headwind on the adoption, and the technology is going to get there probably fairly quickly. But I think it's
5,
the
10,
adoption.
15, 20 years. When do you think we will have a robo-taxi that is 10 times more safe than an average human?
Well, there's these levels, right? I think the Tesla autopilot is at level 2, right? And full autonomy isn't that level 5 or something? And I think
some argue that Tesla is level 3, but
yeah, okay. So two or 3, right? So I think it's going to be at least 10 years before you're at level 5.
I think Mercedes has a level 4 that's been approved in Germany or something, but
I think level 5 is 10 years away. What do you think?
Depends on what I think you phrased it actually rather well. I mean, level 5 is here already today. It's not a question about that. This question is, as you said, when it will scale.
Yes.
So, I mean, level 5, I think the first time you had a car that drove from the west to the east coast in US was like in 1980s. So, I mean, the question is not really when it will come. The question is when it will scale.
Yeah. Level 5 at scale.
Yes.
And that's what we talked about innovation, and also
exactly.
Philosophical. Like, if it's not at scale,
is it really an innovation?
Yeah, like,
is it here?
Yeah. So what's 5, 10, 15, 20?
I'm a more of a Ray Kurzweil kind of person. So I do believe in exponential scale. And if you believe in that, then it will be faster than 10 years.
All right. We'll meet up in 10 years then, or sooner.
Should make a bet on this.
The question going is, for an after-work bet
what's
here.
the success metric here that we should measure? Like, I think, well, okay, let's be real concrete about this, and let's make a bet, perhaps. I'm not sure. At one beer that we have to buy each other or something.
Okay,
this.
Fair enough.
In 5 years, will a majority, more than 50% of all new cars being sold have the ability for level 4 autonomy? And at level 4, I mean, basically, you still have a wheel.
Yes.
You still can take control, but you're not required to. You can just, basically go in the back seat and take a nap, and it still will, drive you there. But and
it will be allowed to do so.
Yes.
So the legislation will be in place to sort everything out in terms of liabilities and all that stuff.
But
in 5 years, no.
I would say no. Okay, to be really concrete, in 5 years, more than 50% of all cars, no, not all cars, 50% of all cars being sold have level 4 capabilities.
No, I think that's possible. Whether then level 4 is used at scale.
Yes, but the new cars having that functionality, they can basically say they can take you the full route, so to speak, but they're still able to take control if you want to.
But you haven't then defined if it's, we can theoretically go and sit in the back seat and the car can do it, but has everything been sorted out like you highlighted?
I thought this question would be easy. I think all of you would say yes on this, but apparently not.
No.
So my next question would have
been... we're talking philosophy here,
yes,
right?
Yes, of course. I think for sure in 5 years, more than 50% of all new cars being sold will have level 4 capability. Then, Mercedes has today.
I think that's, I think that's fair. I think I agree with that. It's not going to be, adopted.
That's another question. It's just if they have level 4 capability or not.
So if you want to make a bet, you need to find something where we disagree.
I was hoping you were going to bet on this one, but you didn't, or we didn't settle on that at least. Then the much harder question would be, will there in 5 years be level 5 capabilities? Basically no wheel, no pedals, no ability to take control at all as a human on new 50% of the cars being sold.
In how many years?
5.
No.
Yeah, I actually agree. But in 10 years, yes, I would say.
Gee, I hope yes, but I think no.
Here's a bet.
We have a beer.
We have a beer bet.
Yes, okay, good.
Beer bet. Excellent.
10 years, 50% of all new cars have level 5 functionality.
Yes.
Cool.
And you say yes, I say no.
5 functionality.
And we're talking Sweden here, right?
Level 5 is no wheel, no pedals. You can't even take control if you wanted to.
You mean it's a flying car?
That would be fun.
Well, we didn't specify.
Actually, does the car have wheels?
Said like
Does the car have wheels?
No wheels.
Okay. I mean like a wheel like this.
Okay, steering wheel.
It will have steering wheel. Sorry.
Has no wheels. Wow.
Okay, that was a good point, Goran.
And
It still have wheels.
We're talking Swedish market or globally?
Only Skellefteå.
Yes, only on the track, Tranås test track.
Globally is tough, I guess, but Swedish market, I was thinking.
Yeah, let's go for Swedish. I stand by unfortunately, my pessimistic no here, even though I hope it is a yes. I hope I can buy you beer then.
Okay, let's do one more philosophical kind of bet here then. We spoke about the future of driving. Let's talk about the future of coding, programming. You love it. I love it. And I've been doing that forever as well. We, of course, can use ChatGPT today and Codex X or Copilot X and so forth that we have that, some people say make them really, really efficient. And then the question is, if we're moving to a future with robotaxis or automated driving, if you call it that, will there be a future, or when will there be a future of automated coding? So with that, I basically mean that instead of writing Python code or JavaScript code or Java code or whatnot, you basically talk to a large language model and say, please add a button on the right top of this interface, or please add a functionality in the car so that it plays this song whenever I get into it. And it reprograms itself.
Right, it's being programmed. It's not just adding a rule, right? It's actually
so it's not changing. It's just not just changing the weights of a deep learning network. It's actually changing the logic, the programming of itself by simply talking to it.
Well, that's almost here, isn't it?
It is, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's amazing how efficient GPT-4 is in coding. I'm not sure if we tried it. It's insane.
No, I have tried it mostly out of curiosity. Most of the coding I do these days is in my spare time, just because I think it's fun or play around on Kaggle. But I'm very impressed and a little bit sad at the same time, because I'd like to think myself as a good programmer, and there's like some skill involved in it. But apparently, it's very easy to mimic.
It is. So the bet then, how should we phrase it? In 5 years, will more than 50% of all lines programmed into a software system in Sweden be done in an automated way?
New software, right? We're still going to have COBOL systems hanging around in a few years still.
I think you can use ChatGPT for COBOL as well.
Yeah, but I mean like new system. It's not...
I think old systems as well.
So, but maybe reframing it, of all lines of code.
Oh, that's interesting.
So, of all lines of code that is written 5 years from now in Sweden, how many there are? More than 50% of those lines of codes are automatically generated. Don't matter what type of language we're talking about.
I think it'd be interesting to. How would you even be able to calculate that metric? But no, I think that's going to happen way sooner than 5 years.
Oh, cool. Yes.
I think so too.
Okay, we have to rephrase it in the other direction this time.
That's like how many months?
Yes.
No, but it's interesting, right? Because if it can program, we will be mad as software houses not to utilize this, right?
And I think software houses are like throwing themselves onto this.
Of course.
And of course you are as well at Telia, right? You're using Copilot or...
Yeah, I mean, my team is very excited about it. Yes, and then we still need to think about there's many interesting things about that need to be sorted as well. What is it? If you didn't write the code, just that who's accountable? Yeah. And there's many things there that we need to sort out. So this is something we're talking about. But it's to use it as a very advanced form of code completion. Yes, absolutely.
So it's actually not unfeasible at all that 50% of all lines of code in 5 years is automatic.
Perhaps even 5 months. Then with that, what about 5 months?
5 months. That's extreme.
I mean, some people for sure are already using. I mean, Karpathy says 80% of his lines of written code is already automated.
I think if you look at all new lines code, all new lines of code written, regardless if it's like deployed or not, because you might have long release cycles or whatever. But yeah, I mean, that's exponentially going to increase. I think this
is an exponential acceleration for sure.
And yeah, I mean, I've been playing around it myself on just for fun, like SQL, Python, C, HTML. I mean, but you can throw anything.
But the interest. Another question: if you consider yourself skilled in programming,
well, maybe I was at a point
But
in time,
can you appreciate? Do you think ChatGPT or the GPT-4 or whatever you have used is it nice? Is it beautiful programming? Is it eloquently done to what comes out, or is it quirky?
I think what I've yet to see, but I haven't personally played around that much with it. It's just been, out of curiosity, it's been snippets.
Yep.
So what I've yet to see is the elegance at like a component system level.
Yes,
when you
exactly.
have, solution architectural construct as well. But that's all also available on the internet, and it's I don't see why
not?
Why not? Yeah. So what is that, and what is elegant code?
Exactly.
Well, it's following a style guide. Well, that's and it's writing things in clever ways, and that's what's been blogged about for years. So I mean, that information is certainly available to the GPT models.
I still remember a time, just like a month ago, I had a bug in just plain JavaScript, and I Googled for it. I searched for Stack Overflow. I couldn't figure out the solution. I just wrote a single sentence in ChatGPT, pasted in the code, said, "Why is this happening?" And it found it answer directly. And I spent like half an hour trying to figure it out myself.
That's amazing and kind of like sad at the same time, right? What was your emotional reaction to that?
I was happy, actually.
Yeah, you were happy because you've been tearing your hair. But yeah.
I was so annoyed not understanding this kind of simple piece of code, and I couldn't figure out why it wasn't working. And I searched for it. I tried to do the normal search engine thing, and I tried to debug it in different ways. I couldn't.
So the AI is better than us at programming, then?
The AI is better in much more than programming, I would say.
Yeah.
Right?
But that's really interesting, because then presumably, if it was exactly like that expressed on Stack Overflow or somewhere else, you would have found it.
Yes.
So somehow ChatGPT actually inferred it somehow.
It reasoned about it and found the specific solution for my very specific problem that wasn't found anywhere, even though I searched for it for a long time.
I think a lot of people are having those aha kind of moments. Yeah. It's like, wow.
Speaking about that and the exponential improvement potentially in AI in general, we just had a big thing happening like yesterday where a lot of prominent people, including Elon Musk and other alarmists, or whatever we should call them, called for a pause in the AI race between especially the tech giants of Google and Microsoft. Did you see this? Or
yes, I did. I was chuckled a bit when I saw it. I wasn't sure if it was a premature April Fool's joke.
Yeah, so that is your reaction to it. What's your thinking about it in general? What do you think about why do you think some people are calling for a pause in the AI race?
I think there's many different reasons. I think why Elon Musk is calling for it is because he wants himself to have a head,
exactly what I was thinking.
To catch up.
Yes.
Of course, my very personal opinion.
That's okay.
But other than that, no, I generally think people that don't at a somewhat deep level understand what's going on, I think, are concerned. I mean, just as back in the day, I mean, a computer would be considered, witchcraft or magic. I think it's kind of similar. And even someone like myself, I mean, I'm not deep in AI like you are, for example, but, have some level of understanding. Even for me, I mean, it's like, it is amazing what we're seeing now with the progress with ChatGPT and how it's able to take the instructional aspects so well. And then just imagine someone who don't have an engineering background, or it just must seem like magic. And I think we should be very mindful and respectful of that it is magic. It's easy to be afraid of what you don't understand.
But it's a bit easy to laugh at this. But if I try to steelman the argument and try to also find some reasons potentially, even though I disagree with the idea, is of course we're seeing some of the tech giants, especially Microsoft and Google, pushing out, releasing new models and services and products in a pace that is never, to be seen before. And, Microsoft especially is, really milking the cow of GPT now.
Yes.
In extreme ways. That they have the Copilot X, as you said, they have it for the Office suite. So now they had it for, cybersecurity purposes. They built
I saw as well.
Yeah, using GPT-4. I mean, they are using it in every kind of product that they basically have. And they are releasing it in surprisingly quick pace. And potentially, if you remember the early days of Bing Chat, based on GPT-4, it was, really angry person or AI, and it was actually making threats to users.
It was not that long ago.
No, it wasn't, like weeks ago or something.
Yes.
And I would argue, I think at least, that was a premature release that hasn't been properly validated, tested, controlled. Would you agree?
I think it was very much on purpose. I think they used that to gather some training data as well, to see, to judge the reaction. And I mean, that's how the Instruct GPT models were created, using reinforcement learning, using human guiding. Yeah. So I think it was well thought out and well executed by Microsoft.
You think it was well executed as well?
Yes. Look at where they are now.
Yeah, and then you can take the Google Bard example. And they released Google Bard, and the launch of that was one of the worst things I've ever seen. The launch by the person standing on stage. For one, they cherry-picked a single example. They haven't even double-checked the facts in that one, and it turned out to be a very horrible, factual error.
Yeah,
in that
one,
single cherry-picked example.
That one perhaps was not so well executed. I guess they're a bit stressed.
They also, in that launch, were supposed to do a live demo of Google Bard, but they misplaced the phone. So when they said, okay, it's time to do a live demo, then people were running around saying, we can't find the phone.
Oh, I hadn't seen that. That's hilarious.
It is hilarious. It's horrifically bad, and I don't see how this is something that is so big for the company, and they lost, billions of dollars in a single day because of this horrific launch. And then, of course, Microsoft launched, GPT-4. Not that long after they released, ChatGPT based on GPT 3.5.
OpenAI, not Microsoft.
Yes, but Microsoft owns,
they've
most
invested,
of OpenAI
but
these
you cannot say
days.
Microsoft, it doesn't work.
I think it's a Microsoft company.
Yeah,
these
they've
days.
invested a little bit of money.
Yeah, not a little bit.
I think I was reading something that they were speculating that what Microsoft released was actually an early version of GPT-4 when they went out with Bing Search.
Yes.
Yeah, so even before
was.
GPT-4 was announced, it was actually the early version that they were like using.
That as well. I would argue at least that Microsoft released GPT-4, OpenAI, if you want to say that. I think it's a Microsoft shop. I consider OpenAI to be Microsoft's version of DeepMind that Google has.
Yeah, but you're with Elon Musk. So
but he has nothing to do with
you
this.
made your point clear.
Anyway, they released GPT-4 in a very rushed way. They didn't have to release it. They didn't have a working version of the most important new functionality of GPT-4, which was the multimodality of being able to understand and work with images. It wasn't ready. It was, the release that they made, you couldn't get access to that type of functionality. They still released it, even though they hadn't one of the major new novel features available. So why did they release it when they just had 3.5 released like a month earlier? I think it's for a very simple reason. And that is they knew that Google were going to release Google Bard. And because that also had image functionality, right? So if they simply beat them to the point and release GPT-4 before Google did it, then Google's release would be horrifically flat. And it went horrifically flat also.
So it was well executed then, regardless if
It was well executed, but it is also going to the point of the pause in the AI race. I think really, if you believe that kind of story, that they're releasing and competing with each other in this extreme pace, that potentially is a bad thing. that potentially is these kind of tech giants are at an AI war right now.
We will have unintended consequences of that.
Exactly.
No, that's a fair assessment. I think. I think it's also it's so interesting to look at these quantum leaps that happen every now and then in tech. I mean, where stuff seems to be chugging along for a while, and then suddenly you have this quantum leap. I mean, it's so interesting. I think a bit philosophical, perhaps as well, is Google really ruling search and Microsoft just like trying for so long, and then suddenly, in a matter of weeks,
the table is
the
turned.
table is potentially turned completely.
Yeah, I wish I bought some Microsoft stocks before.
But maybe
when we are talking about stocks, because the interesting thing is like we are talking like it's something dramatically has happened, right? So
Jesus
Microsoft
Christ.
should be flying. This is
But that's a big
this is
jump, though.
this is nothing, man. Look, so here's Google stocks. So if that was true, what you're saying, we should feel it in the shareholders. In the shares, in the share market, but however, if you look at from the year, nothing has impacted. Here is basically the release of GPT-4 somewhere here. As you can see, there is no drop.
Not
Right?
in Google, right? But in Microsoft.
In Microsoft, here is basically the same thing. It's just a small incremental increase. So why is that?
Oh man, that's actually interesting. Probably the new,
Right.
the big jump before that was probably.
And if we're looking at it in a 5 years horizon, the stocks has not risen
Good
as well. So
data-driven analysis here, Goran.
These are large, I'm not a financial analyst, but these are large blue chip companies, being, investors value them on what they see in the P&L, I guess.
Interesting though. Thanks for pointing
Very,
that out.
very interesting. And what's going to happen here?
maybe as one of the final angles on this philosophical topic is actually we are in the market. You're in the market of product innovation, data, AI, analytics, IoT.
We'd like to think so. Yes.
We like to think so. With the backdrop of the conversation we just had now, how do we understand the marketplace moving the next year, 2-3 years? Do we understand, will the market, let's take Sweden. Is it fundamentally about to change?
I think so. Perhaps largely because of ChatGPT. It's that, Copilot. It's that I think there's going to be an exponential expectation also that most things that are software should be as intuitive and it should work in this way. I think there will be a much higher expectation from a customer side.
And then will we see new types of players, or even you guys? Are you thinking about taking other types of positions? I'm referring to, there have been several articles, how do we build business models around large language models? So we have the foundation model type companies, we have the middleware companies who are sort of focusing on a domain and adding their own data and perspective. And then we have a new breed of customer-facing software that is truly then intuitive and has adopted all of that.
Yes.
The general model, but even niched, for the specific domain they're in, if it's sales or whatever. We have, I don't know if you tried it, HubSpot is a marketing automation tool. They released ChatSpot. So they already have a beta version.
No, that certainly seems to be the thing these days. But I do think we will have much more of a conversational interface, and I think it maybe that is the thing that really helps bridge the gap between when you come with data and having someone who really understands it, is that they can converse with your insights in a natural language way.
So your product will change, maybe, because of this. Even the bar has been raised. The bar has been raised.
Yes, I think our products always have to evolve, and yes, I think this may be a thing where we need to change. Sometimes our product is an API. So, in that case, it doesn't, the consumption is going to be the same, whether it's through a plugin in chat GPT or or into our customers' middleware systems. And
but do you also see how the market now opens up? Like not all players can connect to the large language models. So you will have like some middleware players. I mean, like Telia could be a middleware player as well as a end customer player, as an example, right? Have you thought about that sort of?
I think it's really interesting also from a global perspective. So how do you do that if you're not a global player? I think it's going to be so much driven, from a global perspective here.
Like verticals.
True. And then at the same time, I mean, you have the geopolitical situations, heavy focus on national security, national autonomy. What happens if the country is attacked, the borders are cut, some stuff still need to work. So there's many forces at play here. And it's all going to be, I think, it's going to be interesting times for sure going forward. And I also think, perhaps lastly, from a product perspective, what really, really intrigues me is the plugin model for ChatGPT. It's obviously very useful, but from a product perspective, it's so interesting. Like I want to have my product as a plugin, and I want to be able to have a business model that works.
It's going to be a marketplace that is going to be insane there.
I know, and then...
So elaborate, for someone who doesn't really follow, what do you mean with plugin? What's the business model you're talking about that we are excited about? Could you elaborate a little bit? Just what it is.
Well, so plugins, ChatGPT, for those of you who have used it, and you've asked questions and sometimes you get a reply that, well, I've been trained with some pretty old data, so I can't reply. Plugins is about bringing in fresh data into the context of your chat. So then you could say, please find me restaurants that have this kind of food and people seem to like, and where I can go with casual clothes or whatever. And then you can have a plugin that actually searches the web, or a plugin from, I don't know, maybe a restaurant booking system or something. Yeah. And then ChatGPT would then be able to automate all of that. So I think that plugin ecosystem is, like you're saying, it's going to explode. So as a product guy, I'm really, really intrigued in that kind of emerging ecosystem, and it's happening faster than anything I've seen. And also, what's the business model here?
I think that's a very exciting kind of end topic, and I think that's the time for wrap up. Exciting
We've been at
times.
It for a while now.
We've been at it for a while, so I think it's time to take the last final questions. And we always kind of, what's next in your life? That's one of the ending questions we like to ask. What's happening exciting, or what you're excited about?
Well, I'm really excited about where we're going to be with Division X in 5 years. So, that's very much where my mind is, and this very exciting time, this inflection point with AI, and what do we make of it? And there's so many domains that's going to be so helped by this. We could spend a lot more time on that, but I think, biotech, that's an area that's extremely interesting as well. I think that's going to be really positive for humanity. But now, we're getting deeper again. So.
And any specifics the next couple of months? What are you working on or launching?
Well, we will be focusing a lot on helping building owners to lower their electricity bill and lower emissions, carbon emissions, by scaling out our heating optimization product.
So that's really the next thing that is really...
Well, that's what I really want to see scale, and what a lot of us are really passionate about and working for.
Awesome. And the last question, do you want to recommend anyone that we should have on this show? Have any good ideas?
Have you had Ali Ghodsi on the show, the head of Databricks?
No, if you get him here, that would be great.
Well, you guys can get him. I don't know him.
we want to have people in Sweden as well, to come.
Well, he is a Swede.
Okay, awesome. And we should do that.
That would be cool.
Yeah, they've launched some cool stuff also on they've trained their own LLM model on their Databricks platform, which I thought was pretty cool, and it's much lower number of weights parameters and still performing quite well. And they're doing some cool stuff.
That's cool if we can get that.
So I would love to I'd love to listen to you guys grill him for 3 hours.
That would be really fun.
Kristofer, awesome to have you here as a guest. Awesome that we could take this journey with you for a couple of hours.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
It's been a blast.
Cool. Thank you.